Hey, Josh.
Hey, how's your Sunday going, Sam?
Not bad. I actually discovered something last night that just blew my mind.
I would love to hear it when you have time.
It's a closure library that just impresses the hell out of me.
What, tell me more. A closure library? What is?
You know what closure is? It's a programming language, functional programming
I,
language.
I'm not familiar with that. No, I don't.
It's based on Lisp, and it's been around for about a dozen years. And I found a library today that lets you destructure complex data structures in just the most intuitive way. And I was floored. I got to go back and rewrite a bunch of code now that I found that.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I've been thinking a lot about our two different skill sets, and I was like, how do I interoperate with Sam? And then I was realizing like I'm really good with bicycles, and you're like really good with motorcycles. Like in other words, you have more complex machines that you work with, but I but the bicycles that I have, I mean, the pedals work, they
Yeah,
work. It's just
yeah. You're fine for businesses that want to get on the web and want a presence, want an e-commerce site, want some brochure materials, et cetera, et cetera. I have to work on the enterprise side of things. I have to work on 4 and 5 nines of reliability. I have to work on complex integrations. I have to work on the entire stack of things.
I
So we
totally
have
get
different
it.
issues.
I 90% of the time I'm in the small business zone, and 10% of the time I work with enterprise. And I'm in the enterprise industry, but in the tech world and enterprise, hell no. I'm not doing that. That I would end up like you, where I have to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. Hell no. I left that in 2004. I quit that. Like I quit. I was working in enterprise back then. I quit.
I'll give you a quiz. Contact centers for very large companies that have to deal with, customer requests and calls and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
You know how large some of the largest contact centers are in the world?
I have no idea now. I quit in 2004. So I could tell you what it was in 2004, but now I have no idea.
What was it in 2004? Because I entered that business, in 1997. So I was just curious to see what your triangulation data point was.
Well, I was paying Microsoft back then to use, going back in my memory, it was Windows NT information servers. And that's what I was using back then. Now, my whole world was that. And I left the Microsoft world in 2005. I think I bought my first Apple, and I have the last time I went on a PC, I got a corporate job in 2005, 2006. And at work, I used the PC. At home, I only used Apple, and I haven't gone back to PCs at home since. I haven't owned one since 2004. And I even grabbed my PC at home and I turned it into Linux, and I sat it there for all my guests. So when they would want to look at porn, when I was, when they're going sleeping in my guest room and they're like on my computer looking at porn, the Linux machine worked well. It didn't have very
You got
good
the best
viruses.
porn sites bookmarked.
I just I gave them the browser. I think it was the Opera browser, whatever was the open source browser back then.
If you've got a product or an app that people want enough, they'll wait for ages for the help desk. But if you haven't, they won't wait, and you lose customers.
Yeah. And the reason, Sam, I got into WordPress is the rabbi that lived next to me. I used to hang out on his rooftop because my window opened up to the oldest Jewish temple in Manhattan. And the rabbi ended up emailing me and asking me to help him on this thing called WordPress. And I was like, that's stupid. Why would you use that? That's dumb. And that's how I got sucked into that world in the beginning at version 1.0. And then I think it was not even 1.0, it was like 0.05. And because I started using it back then, with the whole global community of WordPress, I had to put in at least, I think, 800 hours helping other people with WordPress. It's just part of the, if you want to be in the community, you got to put in your community work.
Yeah.
So that's why I got into WordPress. It's not like it's my favorite. I like Joomla and Drupal way better than WordPress when it first came out. I was a big, Joomla. I liked it. It was smarter, better, secure. But over time, I'm so proud of that community. That's why I keep talking about WordPress, is the leaps and bounds that we've made from version 0.05 to I think we're at 4 something. Man, I'm proud of. Nobody had to do that. They didn't get paid for it. They just did it out of the goodness of wanting to help the community. And that's what I see the GCC as, is just no one's paying us for this. We're just doing it because we want to help each other. So that's where I'm coming from when I talk about WordPress. Is just, it started as just a little stupid, tiny blogging thing, and it turned into like billions of dollars are generated with people making a living off of it. I don't know how it happened. I'm still perplexed and vexed, like Barry says.
You know, when I get an issue to deal with my website, it takes a couple of days to get onto the help service desk and get it resolved. But when it does get resolved, what I like about it is the fact that the technicians that are working on it know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And they're able to dig into my question and get it sorted pretty quickly, usually.
That's fantastic. I think anything where you can get help when you need it at the time you need it is so special. I mean, with whatever you're working on, it doesn't have to be computers, but having an expert that's willing to take your call when you need that help is an invaluable service.
So I thought Barry was going to join us. I haven't seen him yet, but I was curious. Obviously, I made a provocative statement at the end there, and Doug referred me to the beginning of the session. I was wondering if anybody who was there at the beginning of the session could give me a rundown of Doug's framing of it. Oh, there's Barry.
He didn't want the session to turn into a straw manning or steel manning. I think that's the objective, was to focus on the values concept from the values side of the issue. How are people triggered? How are the triggers resolved? And are we increasing the value by the process we're using? And should we have rules, a mission statement like Barry suggested, which was a good idea too. So that was formulated at the early stages about the rule of engagement for Sunday unblocking. Very different from barn raising. We didn't want to talk about politics. We didn't want to talk about other people's issues. What do they call that? Projecting onto others. Somebody said this and somebody said that, and I don't agree, and all this sort of individualistic argument. So it was bringing us together. He was trying to centre our efforts onto the values proposition, which he usually is always attempting to do that, and that's good.
Was anybody else there to start? Do you have any confirmation or any other points to add to that?
I'm sorry, I came in as Alex was finishing, so I didn't hear what he said at the beginning.
I think I recall Alex making the points about the fact that Doug introduced this as not a steel manning, not a straw manning, but a more values focused and a more understanding how triggers get handled kind of a forum. And maybe I'm stating it all wrong, Alex, but that's what I got out of your summary.
Doug just wanted to focus on the phenomenon of triggering and understand how it comes about, how it happens, and how we can make agreements up front that would minimize, if not completely prevent, triggering from happening, and come to a better method of managing ourselves so we have less triggering. He didn't want to talk about examples. He didn't want to get into specific cases. He just wanted to talk about understanding the phenomenon. He gave a little bit of an introductory explanation. What is a trigger? What's the sort of the unpacking of what that word means, and then opened it up for how we're going to solve this problem of people being triggered all the time and minimize it and proceed from there. And we talked about agreements. I introduced a well-known example, the 5 agreements of Don Miguel Ruiz, as a well-known example. And I put up the slide and I actually read them carefully. And then we went from there.
Yeah, those are crucial. Those can help a lot. Yeah, Josh.
Yeah, and I added what I learned from being on Clubhouse this last week or so. is there's a button on the app that says leave quietly. And if you, it really helps. It really works. Like anytime someone gets triggered, they don't have to tell the room that they're triggered and tell the room they're leaving. They just leave quietly.
Functionally, how is that different than just leaving?
It's an agreement to push the button instead of
Oh my
causing a
gosh,
ruckus.
the voice is still there. Colin, dude, that's killing me. The whole
I
last
love it.
conversation.
I love it.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I will reset this microphone.
It also sounds like your microphone sensitivity is set way up high because there's a lot of distortion.
It's very Bart Simpson-esque.
Chipmunk.
When you're
It's also
focusing-
missing the lows, so you miss all the bass. So you sound like a, I don't know.
All his bass are belong to us.
Yeah,
You
I'll
sound
bring
like a
the
mature
bass.
chipmunk.
From now
I
on,
got-
I'll talk like this. Go ahead, Alex, please.
I got a joke about this wave. It's the wave is the macro wave like that, and if that's the case, then this wave is a microwave.
Can you do a traveling wave?
Focus is hard.
We are wavering.
Kayla, if you were there, were you at the beginning? Do you have a take on Doug's initial opening statement?
Yes. You know, simple is better for me. So I understand Doug wanted to discuss triggers and how to do better. And to eliminate certain things that could be potentially triggering, like politics and gender and, you know, he said, she said, just basically everything that Barry had said. But I was having a hard time trying to figure out, kind of narrowing it down a little more. Like, did he want us to talk about our personal triggers? Did he want us to bring something else? Did he want us to discuss ways to do it better? Because we could bring up a million examples of stuff like that. But, you know, that's where you get into the specifics of it. So long story short, I wasn't quite understanding. I was just kind of listening to go with the flow and see where it all goes. That's why I said what I said before I left. I'm very interested to see what next week's going to bring, because if it's going to be in the same context, I'm going to bring some personal experiences into play, and hopefully that'll, you know, kind of make us focus around at least one topic. But that's what I got out of it.
I'm puzzled, so I'm going to state a question, and I'm looking for clarification. Was Doug suggesting that we avoid certain topics because they do trigger?
Yes.
In that
Yes.
session, yes.
Oh, I'm going to mute myself, and you might not hear me for a couple of minutes because somebody's getting my washer dryer.
Okay. I find that very, very curious, because that takes a whole slew of serious topics off the table.
Well, I find with Doug, he's very in the now. And he's very emergent. So I try to adapt to and not disrupt too much without just getting definitions and clarifications that I'm not going to trigger. But I find that what he was talking about was navigation of triggers. And I was trying to find out what scope. So avoid triggers, but more to the fact, how do we navigate when they happen as well? And I was trying to emphasize both. And he said to avoid politics and things, and maybe I'm wrong, but I thought it was in the navigation of how do we navigate a trigger. And I'm also thinking about expanding the conversation to the story of what caused the trigger, to some kind of a acknowledgement of a flow chart that is agreed upon. So the misunderstandings can be well understood, or the intended disagreements can be well understood. But I don't think that's the scope. So I'm trying to figure out what scope he's into. And it's almost like I say something and he says no, and then later I hear him saying what I think I just said. So we have a different worldview of models, of what a model is. I think the syntax is as we found with the word agreement. So now he sees need for agreement. So it's useful for him. So he adds it to his toolkit, but he doesn't allow you to use it until he finds it useful, which is strange because you accused me of that recently. And I have the idea of a blank table where we can come and together co-create what goes on that table. So I have tools over there, but Doug won't even let me bring my toolbox into the room. So I have to make extra trips to get my tools if I'm allowed to use them. And it's hard to know the context of what is going on. And so now he also claims that he doesn't want to use the abstract, which I find is a 180 from.
By the way, you guys are all aware this is being recorded, right?
Yes, please.
And we are talking about Doug, right?
No, I've brought this up with Doug, and I'm definitely trying to do it, as Stacy said, in a way where I can just accept my failure to communicate clearly enough and maybe come back and try again. And I find that sometimes I'm afraid that maybe there's a bias against me bringing up the topic. So, it might not be as well accepted. A fact from me is not as valid as a fact from, say, Sam.
I think he was.
I find that Glenn will challenge me on certain unknown topics that when you say them, he'll calm right down and kind of fall into line with what I feel I was. So there's got to be a way that we can navigate thoughts separate from the person, separate from, are these the things that we've agreed upon? And has that thing happened or not happened? Are we dealing with the focused agreements? Because the agreements is what it goes
down. There's a lot of assumptions.
That's a lot.
There's a lot of assumptions there. There's a lot of assumptions there.
Well, I do have some assumptions about what this space is.
There's a dog day afternoon effect happening with Doug because he's trying to simplify the process so that those reoccurring triggers stop happening and they take up so much time.
Wouldn't they stop happening if we actually understood them and understood their dynamics? And in that way, that understanding would give us all a much better context for how to deal with it.
Yeah, how to ask into it.
Which I think is what we've been trying to do. We've just not really been able to get very far, it feels like. On the other hand, Colin, I see your hand, Josh, but let me just ask Colin this one question, because you said that when you say something, Glenn challenges it. But when I say something, Glenn doesn't. And there's a lot of assumptions built in there. Number one, whether or not there's any sort of authoritarian kind of position that Glenn abides with, where I'm concerned. But more importantly, whether or not you actually think I'm saying exactly the same thing that you're saying, and he's just treating you and me differently. Because in my view,
that's a valid point. That's a valid point.
It may not be identical.
Right. That's valid. But I'm thinking, generally speaking, yes, specific examples, we have to be careful. I think I used one and I went back to look for it and I couldn't find it, and it was different than I remembered. So, it is good to have a validated statement.
Yeah. And we don't need to go there right now, but Josh had his hand up. So
yeah, I was just, the logic that you just said of coming at it at a place where we understand each other. If we flip that and turn the telescope around, come at it at a place where we don't understand each other, and how we ask each other for the clarity, I think is the rules of engagement and the agreements. Just
yes.
Come at it with like, I think I know what you're saying, but I heard it this way. And then if the other person wants to clarify,
right,
there's not always that space for that clarification because everyone else in the room got it, but the one person that didn't get it is
right,
holding up the rest of the room. So if we can figure out those rules of engagement, that would be great.
Right.
What did you say? What did you say the other day, Sam, in a meme? It was really good. Questioning into something can be misinterpreted as judgment of it. I think something like that.
Oh no, I think it was just yesterday or the day before.
Yeah.
When somebody said, don't just reject something out of hand, implying God or something like that. And I made a statement, I think, that said something like, probing should not be mistaken as rejection. I think that's the one you're referring to, right?
It was actually a meme, or maybe it was just a statement, because I remember I restated it, and you said, I said, and hence, and I stated the same thing you stated. I'm going to look for that.
I think it's the one I just cited.
Yep.
I'm pretty clear on that one with my memory. Okay,
Yes.
so where I would participate in this conversation is to look at two parts of the quote unquote triggering phenomena. One part is the individual who got triggered. Okay, so let's call this person
B.
Fred. Okay, I seem to be using Fred a lot. Okay, so Fred gets triggered. Okay, and then the other context is the group conversation where we have 7 to 15 to whomever others are happening. And there's a conversation that appears to be going, and there might be some flow there. There might be some, follow on and augmentation of ideas. And there's a knowledge trail or a map or a, bunch of stuff going on, right? And at time T0, Fred gets triggered, right? Now, there's a number of ways to approach this, right? Depending on what this group was constituted to do. If we're like, one scenario is, hey, we're all concerned about Fred. We want to know what triggered Fred. We all gather around Fred. We all assuage him. We all massage him. We all tell him he's doing good. We give him some cake. We give him some coffee. We make sure Fred's okay. And then we pick up on where the conversation was before. Okay? So that's one scenario. Another scenario, I might just try and describe extremes, but there's a whole spectrum, as Barry will likely point out. But the other extreme is, hey, we're in a group and every one of us is paid $700 a day, and we're here to talk about this very particular subject that has got to be key, and there's very important people here. It's hard to get them together, and blah, 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 blah. So now if Fred gets triggered, is the right thing to do for all these other people who spent $700 to go talk about topic, X, Y, Z, to go and do exactly what that other group did for Fred. Okay? And then there's a whole slew of things in between those two extremes. Okay? So I bring a perspective that says, hey, all of us come to these events with some preparation, with the focus of what is the value I'm trying to get and everybody else is trying to get out of this. And if I'm triggered, let me do my own assessment. Oh, well, is this really important? Is this really going to manifestly change how all the other people get value out of this? Because I just heard something so blatantly false that I just have to interrupt, and I just have to put the brakes on this whole conversation and I have to say what I have to say because it's going to materially affect the outcome for everyone. Or is it that, well, geez, I got triggered by this because, when I was 6 years old, somebody pushed me down the stairwell and I got hurt, and therefore I've been carrying this chip on my shoulder for the last 47 years. And, I just got to take care of myself, and I don't want to interrupt everything else that's going on. And again, there's a whole spectrum of situations in between. And that requires judgment.
Wisdom. On
the part of the people who are triggered, as well as on the part of everyone else who's aware that Fred got triggered, and maybe Fred's best friend goes and makes sure he's okay, and then returns 2 minutes later, says, okay, Fred's okay. Or he goes and says, oh, Fred's really hurt, so I got to take him to the hospital, so I'm going to miss the rest of the session, so I'm going to come back and get the notes from you later. Or all 2,000 people say, oh, geez, Fred just got 4 bullet holes, so let's all gather around Fred. Let's hold off the conversation for now because somebody just got shot. That requires a whole lot of judgment, and we all do that individually differently. Unless we have some guidelines that we've agreed to, or unless we're all, wise elders in the tribe who have seen so much of life that we don't need to write this shit down anymore. And again, another whole spectrum in between. There's multiple dimensions at work here. So that's how I would frame the conversation based on what I'm hearing, but I'm not sure, where it went with today's unblocking, but I'll sort of shut up now based on just my reaction to what was said. Over. By the way, I'm not moderating. This is a free form conversation. So I saw, well, okay, I'm not moderating.
see you later, Alex. Have a good morning, or as it
Get some sleep, Alex.
Say goodbye. I thought you wanted to speak.
Yeah. No, I'd like to follow up because on that spectrum, that's kind of the questions I've been leaning into. And I do use extreme cases, as you do as well, to try to show the ends of the spectrum. And a lot of times, the examples I come up with, people don't want to hear and may be offended by me bringing them up. So I have to be very careful what I'm allowed to talk about. But that's not what I really want to mention, specifically with Doug. In that vein, I asked him in a show, and I feel like you were at that show, and I think you said you thought I felt that I might be painted into a corner, and I agreed with you because of the manipulation of the constraints that Doug puts on the space. And you're asking, what are these constraints? Like, what is he asking us to agree to? And, you know, so I asked him, I said, look, we're all in this space, and he kind of makes the point that everybody's here for me, and everybody's putting their time into it for me. So what do I have to say about that? Right. And so my answer is that, well, first of all, I don't think this is the appropriate space to solve this problem. But since he's going to go after that trigger in this forum, I ask everybody in the forum, I say, is this something that other people would like to spend our time following up? Right? So if they consent to that, then I'm willing to continue the conversation, although I can see better ways.
This is a reminder. Intimacy emerging meditation.
Thank you. Medication, everybody. So so the idea is, how do you set up the constraints to be heard? And
Reminder.
Sorry about that.
yeah, that's okay. So the boundaries of the spectrum, are we here to deal with the trigger? Is this the right form of trigger? And I asked that question again today, and maybe I said I'm too far up the line of what he's trying to emerge into, because I'm using examples, because I think that if you are going to look at triggers, you do need some context for it, because you know, they're kind of individual. And I even suggested that in a trigger situation between two people, there might be three conversations. One, each person's understanding of what happened, and then coming together, their Venn diagram of what happened. And, you know, in some cases where people aren't really looking for understanding or have the social skills to do so, they need a moderator. And then you have to wrap all this in the question, is it important? And how much time will it take to trace all this stuff and show that I'm right? It's like, who cares, right? It's like, what are you here to do? That is the question. So I think that pointing out to where someone's garden is and ask them, have they tended to their weeds, or are they just going around looking at everybody else's gardens? Or maybe it is something like, what are the kind of the roles? Like, what's important here? And if I'm tending to my garden, collaborating, somebody comes over and wants to, you know, just speak unkindly of it for whatever reasons, I think that's, you know, an affront of a sort. Now, if it's wrapped in an academic exercise, which is kind of where I'm at with the trigger that I had, and I am looking at it methodically, not allowing it to affect me personally, because I've been told that I'm not supposed to take it personally, even by the person who offended me, but it's still offensive. And to me, it's actually now a question of whether there's a problem between the person's understanding of what they're saying and how it's received. And the question is, am I the one receiving it improperly? Right?
Okay, can I say something here?
Yeah, go ahead.
On this particular point, I'm going to be very blatant and possibly provoking, and I'm going to say, my understanding is you're talking about you and Barry. Is that true or false? You're on mute.
Yeah, it has happened with Barry, and I think to a lesser extent, it's happened with Alex. But Alex had preconception.
Oh wait, so there's also the you Jeswinder axis as well.
The Jeswinder, I think, is different. I think he's just pulling my leg, like, you know, he's trying to be that Joshua.
I've heard you use that same thought regarding Barry as well.
Well, I think Barry's trying to toy with me with my time, not listening to the premise. It's true. It's like I'm
Okay,
sitting
from
there.
here, toying and pulling your leg seem very similar.
No, different. No, it's different. It's like the difference where Jazz Winders kind of give me the elbow. I feel with Barry, it's like cat and mouse. It's a little different game. It's like his toy to play with.
Look,
As opposed to
this
a
could
couple
be
guys
dangerous,
joking.
but in my view, and this may piss both of you off, okay?
Go ahead.
But I think the two of you are actually more similar than you guys think.
I think there are similarities. I've already
You
said
guys
that.
actually have a lot of similarities.
But also we have a lot of differences.
Maybe, okay?
Very much.
But the similarities are what keep the thing going, it seems to me.
No, the
If either one
GCC
of
is what.
you is able to detach, okay? If either one of you is able to detach, the whole thing would kind of, allow each of you to go and pursue other things with your energies and time. But neither of you can detach.
No, I am doing other things consuming me.
But
That's
you're
where you're
still
mistaken.
connected to that conversation, and it's still triggering you.
No, it's not triggering. Actually, I'm perplexed at the example that he actually did it in the after show yesterday. He could do it again, and you could ask him, his example, like, I don't get it, and he could tell you what kind of a literary device it is, and all. Hey, Glenn, how you doing?
Okay, time out. I'm going to be gone for about 2 minutes because I got to respond to this other thing because I was expecting to attend another session in 5 minutes.
I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry.
gonna.
And we don't have to make it about me and Barry
I'm going
because
to
it
stay
is
here. Okay, I'm going to stay here. Hang on one second.
like we can attempt to solve the Barry thing, but I think it's just a misunderstanding of. It's a misunderstanding. Totally. Go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say hello and good to see you because I was listening this morning 3 hours to that conversation between Schmockenberger and Brett Weinstein. So thank you for referring me to that. Very, very intellectual conversation. The most intellectual I've heard in a long time. That was quite intense.
Yeah, I second that. I told Glenn the same thing this morning on the chat that I was thinking about that. And I watched a bit of it before. It's good.
I think
it's in the playlist.
They might have created the intellectual dark web version 3.0 together because that was the most intellectual conversation I've heard in so long.
It was good. It was good.
Yeah, and you noticed, Josh, that Sam created a Google Docs document for that, so we can.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet. Yeah, if you want to share it in the chat, I'll check it out.
I tried posting that doc link as a comment on the YouTube video, and it automatically got deleted at least 2 or 3 times.
Yeah,
which
that's Google.
surprised me.
Did you see my theory? Did you see my diagnosis of why that's happening?
I don't believe it though, because I've been able to do the same thing on other videos. It's just that video where I've been deleted automatically.
It was that you're the owner of the video. So
what?
you have the same. When you're the owner of the video, you're
no. I'm talking about being able to do that on other people's videos.
Really?
Exactly the same action.
With the edit feature enabled?
Exactly.
By the way, I was going to say some. Oh, go ahead, Barry.
I was just going to say they might have upgraded their robots to disallow that recently.
No, I just did this in the last couple of days. I do this various places on YouTube where I find things interesting.
No,
in fact, I've ramped up my activities in that fashion.
Have you tried?
Wait, Josh, you were saying something?
Have you tried posting without the enabling the link to let anybody edit? Just
to me, that's not interesting. To me, the whole link is an invitation to collaborate. And if people can't collaborate there, then I'm just putting forth a transcript, and who cares?
I was just going to say.
In comments.
Josh has been trying to say something for a while.
No problem. I'm just trying to share the frustration of Google because I've been partnered with them, I think, since 2003, 2004. I became a Google partner. And the evolution of that company has gone full circle to the point where everyone at Google can't even give you a straight answer because they don't fucking know. So the point is if there's anything that's vexing and perplexing about Google, please send it my way because I love pushing Google's buttons, meaning getting on the line with actual people that work there and saying, why does this happen? And who can you help? And getting from the inside out and talking to the people that actually work there, because more than likely it's a bug in their system. And they appreciate that when you bring up a bug in their system, because without that feedback and customer support, they can't even, like, Gmail is still in beta. I think, what else is in beta, Sam? I think most of Google is
Every
still in
one of their
beta.
products.
Yes, thank you.
We've announced hundreds of products, and hundreds have been canceled with very little notice. So I don't trust Google anymore as a place to put stuff, you know? Just like I can't trust Yahoo because they totally got rid of Yahoo Groups. And I have 20 years of family history on Yahoo Groups.
Yeah,
You know?
I would not be surprised if Google gets rid of Google. There'll be a day that comes where they just say, we're not Google anymore. We're now
Alphabet.
Accenture. Yeah, there you go. They already did that. We're Alphabet now. And we don't support your Google work site or your, what do they change? G Suite is now Workplace. Like they just do it on you like that. They'll just switch it up. You are on Google authorship. Oh,
I
that
bet you
doesn't
most
exist
of you
anymore.
will not be aware that there was a product called the Google Bridal Registry.
Really?
Yes, because they announced it and then nobody used it, they just canceled it. But hey, they just announce and cancel and announce and cancel, and just you can't trust them.
And sometimes they don't even announce. Like if you go to Google, click on those 8 little squares.
Sorry, we got off the topic here.
Yeah. Well, the topic is, why can't you post the Google Doc onto the video? That's the topic.
Exactly. Well, that was one of the topics, yes.
So was it on the commentary field you tried to post it? And
it was in the
got
YouTube comments, just below the video where you allow comments. I do what I always do, which is I take the world writable link to my Google Doc with a transcript already preloaded into it.
Does everybody remember,
link?
Sam, do you remember when they took off comments for a while and the whole internet, I think it was either on Google Plus or on YouTube, and the internet went crazy. They took off comments for a while.
I actually don't remember that. But
They took off Google Plus entirely.
Well,
Google Plus is gone. This is gone.
They took off Google Knoll, the encyclopedia.
Yes.
Yep.
As well as their newsreader, as well as hundreds. And in fact, I'm going to kill somebody. Sorry, I'm on record here. I'm going to seriously harm someone, okay, if they take away Google Voice. I love Google Voice.
Oh, yeah.
I've been on Google Voice for so long.
They're about to do that. I keep getting notices. I've been on Google Voice forever, and it actually allows me to navigate this world with the phone number.
One phone number.
Yep.
You can change phones, you can change services, you can change anything. You don't even have to have a phone. Okay?
I've had that service for so long, and they're threatening to take it away right now, and it's upending my whole entire life.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah. So when they actually removed do no evil from their list of company principles, you knew it was going down.
Yeah.
Yep.
By the way, Google did initially have a social contract with their own employees. I don't know if they still have it, but I haven't heard about it.
Yeah, now employees who speak up get fired.
Yeah, but they had when they were new, they had that, and Debian were the 2 biggest organizations that had a social contract.
Debian has remained pure.
Yeah. But it's not commercial. Debian is a nonprofit.
Debian is volunteers.
Right.
Yeah.
Glenn, can you put that in the chat? I'm still wanting to see the Google Doc, since Google will not put it in the chat. I want to see that doc.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were on various different topics, and I was just kind of making an observation that Barry and Cullen shared a lot of commonalities, shall I say, okay? And that doesn't have to be pursued in this particular conversation, but the one that I actually will pursue, and I will preface this by saying, I got triggered when Doug said what he said at the end of that previous session.
Oh, no models.
Yeah, is this whole no models business about agreements business? Because those were proposals that were being made into this GCC space 3.5 years ago.
Well, I don't think, no.
Wait, time, let me finish.
Okay.
And there wasn't a generous, curious leaning in to that. There was just very, very quick, no, this is not what's needed. There was rejection.
Of what?
Of agreements, of models, of abstract thinking, of human doing versus human being. And I've disagreed with Doug on every one of these points for 3 years.
And I think he's very abstract.
Yeah.
So I think that there is underappreciation for not leaning in. So sorry. There's an underappreciation that we have seen the harm and the delays and the pain that out and out rejection has caused. Now, I am very sensitive to this. I may be overreacting, which is why I reserve final stance pending my view of the early start of the last unblocking. But to me, this is what it raises for me. Now, I will apologize. I'll be a big boy. I'll shut up if indeed that was not the case, okay? But this is just what is being brought up for me as I heard that at the end of the last unblocking. Over.
So the question in my mind is he changing or evolving his message? And
well, evolving is changing, right?
Yeah. But in essence is, I think one is, I used to think this, but now I think that, as opposed to, oh, it seems that this is what this has emerged into. Like as the process changes underneath your feet, or are you making the decisions, basically? And anyway, the space that Doug has, I don't think in the beginning, as he says, he was reluctant to make container rules, as he seems to be doing in the show today. So go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say to Grok, Doug, and what I understood, I missed the beginning of the conversation today, but in helping him and Gertrude stand up Friday session, it took them about 2 months to create a sentence, or I'm sorry, not a sentence, about 2 paragraphs that you say at the beginning of Friday's Appreciators method, so people know what the rules of engagement are to welcome in new people to Friday's Appreciators. And what I understand from Doug, what he said at the end of the conversation today, is he's trying to stand up those rules for Sunday so that he can say something that's not just him, but from everybody that's participating in creating that in the beginning of that container. So it's a container that we all want to come to. That's the way I understood it, Colin. If you want to,
I did too. And when I brought up that comparison, he brought up a rule I broke by mentioning Gertrude in a specific example. And I said, well, you need to have context of examples in order to understand what you're talking about, or models, whatever.
But yeah, I just want to say, instead of getting confused about what's going to happen, participate in what could happen, in the sense that he's not creating the rule and then saying this is the rule. He's asking you and everyone else in the group, what would you like to have as the thing at the beginning of it? So it's still being formed. It's in process.
I agree with that.
It's not complete. That's all I want to say.
That was different than his response to my question. My response to his question, his response to my question was, Doug, are you imposing these rules? Remember that at the end? Yeah. And he said yes.
And he did the same to me. Even though I think we're speaking, like Josh says, the same language. So there's some discernment that has to happen. When I say, yes, I agree with you, Doug, I think this is a beautiful idea, and then I'm totally off because I mentioned somebody's name or a model, it's like I'm not allowed to use English. I have to switch to Chinese or something. I don't know.
Dougie's. You have to use Dougie's.
Dougie's. Yeah. And I do try that. I do try Dougie's.
Well,
Dougie's is a beautiful language.
Officially what they call his language, Dougie's.
He has his own
Douglish.
Douglish. Yeah.
Dark River.
Yeah.
His name means Dark River.
Josh has his hand up for a while.
Well, I hope I understand Douglas. So what I understood Doug's language saying, these rules are something that in the future would be imposed, but right now he's still composing the rules before they are imposed. So they're in the process of composing, but once they're composed, meaning published, written, and clarified at the beginning of Sunday's unblocking session, those will be the rules until they are changed at some point in a later date.
I would have been happy with that response, but that's not the response I heard.
That's what I heard in Dougie's. I'm just saying, that's what I heard.
Could some of you explain briefly what the rules this is?
Yes.
We're talking about here?
The example that we brought up as a classical example, what Doug had in mind, is the famous 5 agreements of Don Miguel Ruiz. We use that as a classical example of what we have in mind. And we could adopt those precisely, or we could use them as a starting point, for example.
Can I say though?
I'm gonna bow before you say something, Sam. I'm gonna
Yeah,
just
I know,
bow
that's a
out.
model.
I'm gonna say goodbye. Thank you guys, everyone. I'm leaving quietly.
Okay, thanks for your
I just
clarifications,
voted-
Josh.
And Joshua, did
Bye,
you find in the
Josh.
chat? Yeah.
Okay, but let me
Bye-bye.
stop you right there, okay? Because if we are going to adopt the 4 agreements or 5 agreements, nobody would get triggered.
I think
Nobody
that's
would get
true.
triggered
I
if you
think that's
actually follow those agreements.
The 5th one, I have a problem with.
But you
I
love
like it, but I have a problem at performing it.
Oh,
What's that? This one. What is the
Being
fifth one?
skeptical.
What's the problem with the 5th one?
Skeptical. I don't have a problem with it. I have a problem abiding by it and not being shot with arrows.
What
Repeat
is
the 5th one again. Remind me what the 5th one says
Yeah.
exactly.
What is it?
I'd have to bring up the,
Because I think I remember the first 4.
It says
But,
be skeptical.
Oh, I don't like that.
Wait a minute. Is it really be skeptical? I don't remember that way.
Certainly is. I said I loved it in the chat. I loved what Doug was saying too, but we're speaking different language. I need to.
I can read it. I can even put it up if you want me to put it up on share, but I'll just read it. Number 5, be skeptical and learn to listen. Don't believe yourself or anybody else. Use the power of doubt to question everything you hear. Is it really the truth? Listen to the intent behind the words and you will understand the real message. And if you like, I can put up the slide with all 5 of them.
No, I got it. I have found it also.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the possible.
You can see the problem with that, eh?
Well, that's everybody here will probably interpret that differently.
I think it's pretty clear actually, but it's a very big thing.
Okay, how is it clear to you? What is your understanding of it, Glenn?
Well, it's basically asking for a truly impartial mind that's unattached to any beliefs, and you're open for the possibility that anything could be wrong. So it's basically a really open mind in the full sense of the word. That's how it sounds, and that's a very big thing.
Mhm.
But I
Okay,
definitely
I actually
think it's
like
worth
that. Can I ask you a
starting
question? Does that incorporate the notion of critical thinking?
Of course, yeah. But
Okay.
it's sort of the difference is like it's like critical thinking in all directions. So it's
Right.
kind of because often when we think about being skeptical,
Okay,
it's usually
so let me
towards
also
one
ask you
thing.
this. I have 2 questions on that point. Does it also include Occam's razor?
Wow, I think Occam's razor is very useful in practice. I don't know if it's really a part of that, but I mean, brevity is certainly valuable in a conversation, or simplicity.
So I'll say, for me, Occam's razor is much more important than I just heard you say. In other words, Occam's razor removes dimensions of belief where they are unnecessary.
Well,
That's a good
okay,
point.
then you could say that maybe you should remove all belief, if that's how you could understand this basic thing.
Whoa. First of all, critical thinking has the distinctive property of being corrective thinking. Okay, so whatever that means in correction. So an Occam razor is one way you can measure things to maybe pick a correct 1 out of 2. It makes sense. Why add extra burden to an
It's a heuristic, but not a proof.
Yeah. So, and I think that's, and therefore you have to make a claim. How confident am I that such and such? And, that's all good. And, that's how science works, by guessing
Okay.
things.
So then I'm going to pose a 3rd question, not to Glenn, but to everybody, okay? Because to me, there's open-mindedness and then there's gullibility.
Your brains fall out.
Exactly. There's that old saying, right? Be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brains fall out.
Again,
And
that's why I said
therein is another judgment that one must learn how to navigate.
yes, and that's why I said it's a very big thing, because if you're truly open-minded in all directions, you're also open-minded for the fact that something could be
And
wrong.
oh, by the
so-
way, that's also
That's it.
not just Don Miguel's 5th rule. That's Buddha's rule.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's one
Yeah.
fundamental to Buddhism.
I think so.
If
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense, don't believe it.
And there's probably
The
20
Dalai Lama
ways.
says it all the time.
Maybe
Okay.
don't believe anything. It's like a
In fact, the
freedom
Dalai
zone.
Lama very strongly supports science.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of course,
And
that's
it's bullies and liars you got to watch out for, but how do you know? Sometimes it's more obvious. But
But
that
you
doesn't
mentioned-
mean, that
yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean, but that's again a heuristic. But again, there's one more thing I wanted to bring up,
Okay.
which was the word secular. And I've been totally misinterpreted with the word secular. And so you can look up the dictionary term, but if I'm saying secular as in an adjective and then I add the noun to it, which is space. So a secular space, not a secular person. And therefore anybody can come to that space. That's if it's not a secular space, then there's some kind of a bias, or how do you say, enforcement, like Doug is going to bias conversation so that some things are not allowed there. Now, I don't think it has to do with religion. So maybe I'm talking about a secular thought space, including all thought, like when Glenn challenges me about some of the unknown, and if I'm making an assumption that it already doesn't exist. I keep explaining to him several times, I'm not making a claim it exists or not. You are.
No,
And
I'm
that's
not
a big
making it.
distinction. Well, then why are we talking about it?
Well,
That's what I mean.
This comes back to the first question, the fifth part, because if we have a truly open mind, that's the opposite of being gullible. So it means that you don't latch on to any explanation at all, but you can entertain an idea, you can entertain it as a hypothesis, or you can just entertain it as a metaphor, but you're not attached to it. So I think it's a very big thing. It's sort of easy to understand it in theory. It's probably what Buddhism is based on.
Yeah.
As I understand it, it's really this complete freedom
So
from
Glenn,
all attachment.
I support that interpretation. I actually like that interpretation. However, some people who come forth don't like being probed. And it's very apparent. If there's a strong belief where a probe into that belief generates a very defensive response, I myself can say, okay, fine, I won't do that much more, but I also won't necessarily lean into that particular belief.
What
True,
about
yeah.
God? What about God? Like, not sorry, God. I mean, Doug God. Like Doug claiming he is a God. How serious do we take that claim? Like, what does that actually mean? Like, what's the analogy there? Because he's very adamant about identifying with that.
I think he's just saying he has autonomy over himself.
Yeah.
And he has the total power to create reality as he wants it to appear to himself.
So and he doesn't put that over us, but maybe,
I don't think he's saying God in that he can make you
No.
crawl on the floor and go eat dog food. I
No,
don't
no,
think
no,
that's the kind of
I mean,
thing
I
he's
think
talking
it's
about.
authority. I think you hit the right word, authority of his space. And so when he enters a space as his God, maybe that's the container we're going into. So how does that affect the container? This is a similar question to Glenn saying when scientists operate, they're operating in a container of fear, or fear corrupts it. Like that's another
Yeah,
angle
fear
of
of the
That's
unknown.
another big assumption.
I know, but that's what
Oh.
Glenn is saying, that maybe
Well,
fear is a root of
we
something.
talked a
But I'm
little
saying
bit
we
about
can talk about these things, but those are the containers that we're in. And what does it mean when Doug says he's God? Does that translate? It seems to translate to painting people into corners and
Okay.
laying things out.
You could say that, but I also think it could be quite enabling and empowering. And Barry, I
can
see
be.
your finger, okay?
It can be,
So
yes.
do you
it can
want to speak before I speak?
There's many formats one can use and agree to.
Okay, so I'm saying this. If Doug takes the position that he is 100% responsible for his view of reality and how he behaves and the actions he takes and the words that he issues, and if each of us does the same, no excuses. Not like, oh, I got angry because so-and-so said this, or I got triggered because you said that. If
And that's why you
each
said
are
you wouldn't walk
saying-
with your feet. You said you would be a dissenter. I'll stay, but I'm going to be a dissenter. Like, yeah.
I said, I'm taking responsibility. I don't necessarily fall in line with what I thought I heard was a rule, but I ain't leaving. That's me being my own self.
I think you're on a roll. I think
Okay.
this is Yeah, I think this is sort of what it's about.
Yeah.
It's some kind of
And you do it
radical
better than I.
responsibility.
And what I'm saying is, though, if you take Doug's position, and if Doug says, this is the way I want everyone to behave, then if we all did that, triggers wouldn't happen.
True. Yeah. We would
Well, we
avoid
need
a
test
lot
cases,
of,
if you ask me, and or a lot of time to let it
Oh,
emerge.
Doug's a perfect test case. He volunteered to be doing this. He wants to be this. Okay.
Well, focus.
In fact, I might be the provocateur because I know that I can trigger Doug.
No, that's the jazz thing, because I know
No,
you
that's
like
my
that.
ego speaking. Okay, sorry.
No, but that's how jazz does it. He gives you the old elbow, right? And that's good at times.
Hey,
Like
but at
you
least
love-
I'm doing this, stating it up front. Okay,
Yeah, but what's
tongue in cheek.
like, it's great here. We're in kind of like a special space. This is, what I'm hoping a sign of progress is.
Okay. Anyway, you've helped me understood what I think Doug meant when he issued his statement at the beginning of that last unblocking. And as soon as he makes it available, I will go listen to it within the first 24 hours. Okay. Because it sounds like I might be in disagreement with him, but if I'm not, I want to, come clean on that.
And I would like to do a retrospective video where me and you watch it and comment on it, but I might have to do it alone. Maybe me and Glenn could do it. Because, I think I'd like to do that with, that's what I was thinking, Glenn. It would be cool for me and you to do a joint retrospective of Schumacher while he's going through it. Because if we both agree with what he's saying, what does that mean?
Schumacher or
I mean,
Schmuckenberger?
Schmuckenberger.
Yeah. I'm definitely, I want to work with that document because.
Well, the Google Doc is a great place to start. So,
Yeah.
Hey, Glenn, if you actually do go back and work on it, it would be awesome if you or anyone else goes and does some initial speaker identification. I did it for the first 9 or 10 minutes of that session, okay? And then I listened for another 20 or 30 minutes. So I'm not anywhere near deep into that conversation yet. But I think speaker identification is one of the things that automatic software can't do well yet, which humans unfortunately do way better than software right now, like even Otter.ai. So I think that's really key.
unless you have a format.
I do have a format. I use the Otter format. I use the, greater than space name.
Oh, no, you got to use the new software I'm building. That will do it.
Right. Right. I'm going to ignore that, okay?
Well,
I'm going to
it's
dismiss that,
coming.
and I'm going to trigger you by saying I ignore that.
No, that's fine.
But
The
that
reason
would be, yeah.
The reason we have this overtime is because at the end, Doug said he wants to eschew models in favor of his narrative approach. And at least Sam and I are into models. I do model-based reasoning. That's almost the only way I can do deep reasoning is with models. And I think Sam comes from pretty much the same perspective. And I wanted to share a model of this whole thing that we've been talking about. And I think Kayla will also appreciate this, which is why I wanted to wait until she was back. So I'm going to go ahead and put up a screen share if it's okay. Can you see this slide? It's called Vexagon diagram. Now, these letters around the outside, these are just the names of the characters. Think of a soap opera. Here's Fred, for example. Maybe this is Colin. Maybe this is Barry. Maybe this is Doug. And we'll start out a conversation with, let's say Alice makes a comment, says something, and that comment triggers Doug. He reacts. He's the one who jumps to react, and so Doug makes a reaction, and that triggers Barry. Barry, sort of startles and raises kind of an alarm and says something, and that triggers Fred. And then Fred reacts, and that triggers Colin. And Colin reacts, and that triggers Ethel. Ethel reacts.
That's assuming a closed loop system, and where there's filters and manipulation. I would say that would be a pure example, potentially, of a large collection of people.
Can we at least say this is a partial presentation of a model? I mean, clearly this
No. This is no model. This is an abstraction.
May I continue to present the model, and then you can.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, Doug in his new room, he'll cut the connection between C and E, right? And then it's gone.
How do you know that?
because he dismisses that he's making rules of the container. And
Oh, wait a
Gertrude,
minute. I don't think Barry's done presenting what Barry
no,
wanted.
no,
to
no,
present.
go
Yeah,
ahead. I'm just
yeah.
making the point.
This-
Sorry.
Yeah,
It's a-
finish
it's
it,
This is only about a
Barry.
3-minute slide.
Yeah,
So I'm happy to have people discuss it, but I'd like to get through the end
Go
of
for
it
it.
first.
go for
So
it.
Doug talked about that the cause of a trigger reaction is fear. So each of the characters has an idiosyncratic fear that's causing them to react to a gesture or remark by somebody else. And so each character in this vexagon diagram, each character in the vexagon responds to a triggering remark or gesture of another character in a cyclical loop. And because they all have their idiosyncratic fears, in order for this to continue indefinitely, the fears have to be in some kind of a balance. And the reason that I call this Clancy's theorem is because the vector sum of all the fears that are driving these characters has to balance out. The sum of all fears is 0, and that is equivalent. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Can I go back? That's, I went the wrong way again. All right, hang on a
So while
second.
you're bringing that back, can I respond?
Yeah.
I think you're assuming, or I hear an assumption, that each of A, D, B, C, F, whatever, okay, will trigger. What I don't see reflected in this diagram is within each A, B, C, D, E, F, the dampening function, or at least kind of a rubber suit or a rubber cell, so that they can contain the triggers. So they can actually say, be a little bit in control of their own response.
Or
So they can say,
divert.
yes, I feel a response coming on. And yes, I feel that it's probably going to take me out of balance, but I choose to control it in such a way that the group conversation can still maintain and be productive. I don't see that reflected here. I just
Right.
see response, boom, emission, response, emission, response, emission. And I think that is too simplistic.
The reason that I wrote it this way is because this is in a section called drama theory. So this is a model that makes a drama have continuity. This is a continuity theorem for a drama that doesn't just stop, but continues. So the idea is that Shakespeare called it much ado about nothing. This is the much adoing. And it's about nothing because the net sum of all the fears has to balance. Now, in a drama, you want continuity, because if you have a drama and all of a sudden people stop talking or dials down, you don't have a drama anymore. So this is a theorem in drama theory, which is a generalization of game theory. So if it dials down, then you don't have a drama. And
But I'm also saying that if you don't really adjust for something that could be more closer to reality, then you're just going to let this model play out.
Right.
And I'm suggesting that a better model is that each one of us has an ability to assess and control that trigger.
there's more
That's what I've
than
been saying
that.
for 3 years.
There's more than that,
how
because
can you do that?
if you
That's
think
not really
if
a
you-
model, though. Isn't that more like an ability?
It doesn't matter. Theory, diagram, Venn,
Hold on,
whatever,
hold on,
you
This is
know.
important. This is important.
I got,
Oh, yeah.
got one more
Go
thing
ahead,
to say.
Go ahead, Barry.
Shakespeare wrote just 2 different kinds of dramas. What are the names of the 2 different kinds of dramas that Shakespeare wrote?
Tragedy,
Comedies
comedy.
and tragedies.
Tragedy and comedy. What's the difference between a tragedy and a comedy? What happens in a comedy that does not happen in a tragedy?
People laugh.
Why do they laugh? What makes them laugh?
Things work out.
What happens in a comedy is they have an aha moment. They discover that they're in this model. And as soon as they discover that they're stuck in this model, they go, duh, and they have a big laugh about it, and it's a comedy. And if they don't discover that they're in this model runs endlessly, and it's a tragedy. They shoot each other, like the tragedy of Romeo and Juliet. So
Maybe-
the
maybe
difference
in the
between a
continuum
comedy and
between-
tragedy is whether they have the aha, I'm stuck in this model with everybody else.
I don't-
As soon as you realize that you're in this
changes
model,
it.
you do what Sam did. Oh, I'm stuck in this model. I don't want to be in this model. So I'm going to change my nature so I don't trigger. I'm going to dial this thing down. And then we have
That's one way to build that mental image. I'll give you that and not criticize your model. You're building a mental image based on an example, which is abstract thinking in a model. which Doug won't allow you to do. That's banned now.
Well, this is
I
pretty
don't
much
do it
in
in his
line
system.
with,
I do it in Sam's.
this is in
Well,
line
this is
likes
the
with
point.
Doug's
This is the point.
ideas.
This is the point. Like, and I'm not trying to criticize this. I see this as, like, for example, the ideal model of sum of zero fears for what you're trying to show. But like Sam, I see nuances that you can use with this perfect model and show how it doesn't go to zero. And one of the things that I discovered and what I wanted to say was the triggers persist in my mind when misunderstanding persists, or when bad intention or lies persist, and whether it's important or not, how much time I can put into it.
So
And
how do
I
these
think
characters
that's
evolve?
I think that's a valid summation of the fact that when you're looking at these triggers, they're not just it doesn't necessarily have to be a one-off event. That's one kind of navigation. And in defining a container space to deal with triggers, I would almost pull the reaction that Barry took to when I started talking about people adapters to what Doug's trying to do. But I'm not going to get all freaked out and approach it that way, where I would think that reaction would make it so that Doug would never want to collaborate with me. So I'm choosing how I deal with this problem I'm having with Doug. And with Glenn, I'm being very gentle with the fact that he doesn't realize that the person who makes the claim has to show the evidence. And he's saying, I can't prove it's not true. And I said, maybe I can't, but I don't have to. And so, and he writes in capital letters, that's the point. Well, I'm writing in capital letters, that's
Well,
the point.
What I wrote in capital letters is about this specific theme, that you can't define something which is unlimited. It's a very special species of ideas.
Well,
Okay, I'm going to object again because I think you can.
Yeah, well, you said a kind of definition. We covered that yesterday, but still, you know, it's not a definition the way we usually think of definitions. If you have a certain concept which by its very nature is mysterious, that was what I was pointing towards. And Schmachtenberger also actually mentions this, that science and all rational thought has to happen within a container which is undefined and undefinable. Whether you call it the Tao or you know, whatever, but there's always an element that you can't capture inside of a model or inside of a thought or inside of anything. But sometimes we nevertheless have words which point to this. And
Glenn,
yes.
do you know what Sam's answer is going to be? Because I think I do.
Oh, I'm looking forward to hearing it.
What doesn't disappoint him?
Okay, let's hear. What is it?
It's part of the answer, okay? But the fact that you can only approximate does not mean that the approximation is useless. The approximation still has, but. When you say you cannot define, and I say, yes, you can, and you say, oh, but then it's going to be missing some aspect of it, then in a sense, you're saying that's not the right definition. What I'm saying is, no matter how bad the definition is, if it's as good as we can get, then it's still useful. Okay? And as we learn more, we can refine that definition. And so that's an always ongoing process.
Let me give an example, whether you would call this a definition. If I offer something that I would call the ultimate anti-definition, the definition is, it is a complete unknown. We can't say anything about it. We can't visualize it. We can't comprehend it. So we have to relate to it as a complete mystery. If you would call that a definition, then
yes, that is a definition, because I can still probe at that definition. I can try and figure out, what do you mean by understanding, and why is it therefore that this thing cannot be understood? What do you mean by listening, and why is it that that thing cannot be listened to? What is it that this thing, you know, has no limits to? What are, you know, I can ask you based on every one of those words that you use in that definition.
As well as, is in that unknown a set of possibilities or some possibilities and some things that are not possible?
Probably, yeah. There's a lot of possibilities that we don't see, and maybe some restraints.
It's when people
Well-
say that there's no impossibilities in there is when I have a problem, because there's both. Like square circles are in there.
How much
Yeah,
of this is knowable about any person you're having a conversation with? If you know very little about this, what happens? If you know practically everything about this accurately, what happens?
Yeah.
Is it better to know as much of this accurately or as essentially nothing? They're a null model.
I
What
think
would happen?
Glenn, though, in talking to him quite a bit about this, he's trying to put a stake in the ground that it can be done so much better. I think that's and the fact that we don't realize the unknowns, respect to the possibilities in the unknowns, we're not going to be able to do things better. Now, I don't know. I heard the Avi Loeb, who was the Harvard guy who's talking about Moa and the fact that they titled his book, Aliens Have Arrived or whatever. And Michael Shermer, the skeptic, had him on his show, the Michael Shermer show, science show, used to be called Science Salon or something. And he said, isn't that a bit misleading? And he says, well, that's what the publishers want to put on it. So he says, and if you keep asking him questions about it, he's dealing with this unknown, but it really sounds like he's hoping to get funding. And a lot of his complaints are how other things get so much funding. Why doesn't the thing he want to look at in science get funding? So, I could see Glenn saying, yeah, fund Avi Loeb, real science here. Can't get any funding. I see that as like the world of unknowns and possibilities that Glenn is fighting for. I don't see Glenn fighting for some kind of supernatural God that I would find to be a problem.
Well, for me, this relates back to the point we discussed earlier about rule number 5, about having a completely open mind. And the thing about, let's say that you can accept that a model is always limited, and that the fact that it is limited in relation to the space around it is what can make it useful. And let's say that if we are aware of this fact continuously when we use the model, then we can use the model instead of the model using us. And I have a feeling that Doug is pointing towards this, and many people are, that because we have a tendency to get stuck inside of a model. And it's so the model effectively hypnotizes our minds and acts as a kind of a container, and we falsely see that model as representative of the larger reality. Yeah.
I mean,
So
look at these elements. How many of these elements can you fill in for yourself? And how many can you fill in for the other people in the room? Go ahead, Sam.
Okay, so let me first address that question, then go back to Glenn's question. But Glenn, be prepared to restate your question, okay? Because I may not remember. But Barry, this is a good list, but I would also say it's a partial list.
Sure, add
Okay.
more.
So it goes back to Glenn's question, which is there are 2 stages, in my opinion, at least 2 stages of using a model to think. One is think within the model. What does it lead you to? What does it guide you to? And then the other is, how do you expand that model? Where it is not yet able to explain certain things, what must you then do to that model to improve it, expand it, refine it, whatever, push the envelopes of it.
Right.
And I hear too much of the criticism of model-based thinking as only part 1. And if you're really adopting a learning mindset, a growing mindset, an agile mindset, you got to do both. Models are approximations. They're not the truth.
And
They're an
beware
approximation of the truth.
the angry critics.
Yeah. And this is why I say critics who don't understand model-based thinking and aren't thinking of stage 2 will naturally have that criticism. But if they're now going to say, okay, because of that, because of my limited understanding, I will disallow this kind of thinking. Now, who's doing the correct critical thinking?
what if you don't disallow it, but you're warning against a danger. Which
I didn't
is
hear a
pretty
warning.
common. I think that's what I'm doing.
Okay, I'm open to it being a warning, but I didn't hear it as a warning. I heard, no, I will not allow that. That's kind of almost verbatim what I heard.
That's how I felt.
Yeah.
And I think it's because we weren't in the right container. And I don't think if we went to another channel, which is kind of what the Was social banter is, tried to take it away from Heiner because he's tired of listening to it. But Glenn still wants to challenge me on the soul. I still want to talk to Glenn about the soul. I don't really think the people in Facebook GCC wants to hear about it. But if we came to some discernment map that really explained our different points of view, that would be a useful artifact to bring back and talk about. But
Yes.
it takes conversation. And so that's channeling and that messy spitballing. Some people can't take it. Barry, I find, can't take it.
You could say this is the soul of
Let's
the character.
drop that stuff, right? Because yeah, I also want to go into those things, but if we're gonna do that, we have to have enough space, have to have enough patience, and we got to put all that drama stuff away and the ego stuff away and even assumptions away. And if we can really try to lean into that space, I think we can find something very interesting there.
Well, let's come to one agreement for GCC's easement. Let's not have Barry call me not a scientist anymore.
Because
I don't see what point he's trying to make.
Why do you have to respond to it?
I don't, but I don't appreciate it. So as someone leaning in, I could ask them.
Can you imagine there's some things that you say that Barry does not appreciate?
I hope that we're not exactly the same. Yes.
So the answer is to stop doing that.
I'm just saying, let it go.
No, I
focus on the germane point, and then let the rest of the shit go. You guys post 200 items per day. I can only read 3 or 4.
It's not about me, Barry. It's not about me.
Yes, it is. Right now, this is about you and Barry. Okay, you guys post 200 items per day, and I am not able to respond to all of that. I'm even surprised you guys can. I don't believe you are. So I think that you just choose what it is that's really germane, respond to that, let the rest of the shit go.
But that's not what the channel's for.
Well, then you are choosing to engage. So don't complain about the engagement if you choose to engage.
But what topic do I choose to engage in? The town square?
I asked you to focus, but you're focused on 200 different topics.
No. Hold on. Am I talking in that channel? Hold on. Am I talking in that channel about what I'm building? Not necessarily. Am I talking in that channel to that to me, that channel is like the town square, but off to the side where these people can discuss what they want to. It keeps it out of the main shows.
Yes,
it gives
I appreciate that.
It gives an outlet to that pressure, which continues the miscommunication.
Well, why does there need to be the pressure in the first place? The pressure is inside you.
No, it's bad social skills for number one, and it's
misunderstanding. It's inside you, Colin.
So I agree with
what
Sam
I'm saying
here.
is I have the right to say to somebody who disparages me, you disparage me, I don't want to collaborate with you.
So say it
Right
and
to
move
say
on.
doesn't
Say it and move on.
And move on as quickly as
I
possible.
have
Say
said
it and move on. No, you're not moving on. You're not moving on.
Hold on. I can't move on completely because I'm not.
Yes, you can. You are your own agent, are you not?
No.
Are you your own God?
No, I assume that completely shunning that person would not be appropriate behavior.
That's a big assumption, right?
It's not shunning.
I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to shun him.
It's just to leave it alone.
Well, then you choose to engage and then live with the consequences of that engagement.
It's a very simple way to deal with it.
I choose to engage.
I'm going to go get breakfast now. Okay.
Well, the thing is, I do choose to engage with 5 agreements.
Answer. It's a very simple answer, and Sam just said it. It's a very simple answer. Just let it go, and go straight back like an
for the record,
arrow.
Kayla is now the host. I am departing. Okay.
Yeah, I'm
then you go straight back.
Don't
like
make me
an
the
arrow.
host.
Well, then you can make somebody else host then, Kayla.
Have a wonderful evening or afternoon.
I don't know how to do that.
Okay, Kayla's stuck being host because she doesn't know how to change it to someone else.
Sorry. Yes.
Bring up the participants And you can select anybody to become host with the 3 dots.
Yeah, I don't know if Colin fell out here, but yeah, I think this is important that to really just refocus back on the main topic, like because at least I feel that I can't really explore seriously those kind of really complex questions if there's going to be this sort of drama
Yeah.
back and forth, pretty childish stuff. And
By the way, Sam made a very good point about expanding the model. And I'll tell you, this is not the model I started with. What I started with, oops, I didn't mean to do that. I wanted to do this. I wanted to do that. When I first asked if there exists any such thing as a storybook character model, the first person who answered it said yes. The basic model is BDI, beliefs, desires, and intentions, is the minimum things you need to know about a character to define a storybook character. And I thought, BDI, three layers? That's not enough. And I began adding more layers until I thought I got to the point where I couldn't think of any more. But if people can think of more layers that to flesh out a storybook character, a dramatic character in a play, add them in. But notice the hardest ones to get. I mean, I once asked Colin what he thought was the most important. He thought issues was the biggie. I think backstory is the biggie.
are we now speaking about the conversational people adapter idea, for example, in relation to that?
You're a little muddy.
Well, we're sort of speaking about the people adapter idea.
We can. I mean, I spent 8 hours listening to Colin until I finally extracted in my own mind what I thought he meant by a people conversation adapter. And I was able to write it down in about 3 sentences. And I wrote it down and I gave it to Stacy, I gave it to Colin, I gave it to Sam. Doug told me he looked at it just a day or two. And the first question I asked is, can you understand my summary? Can you read my summary and understand what I have expressed as my understanding of what those 3 words meant? And everybody who answered said yes. And then I said, does it make sense? And let's see if I can remember. I'm pretty sure Sam said it made sense. I think Stacy said it made sense. Doug said he understands the model. He thinks that the idea doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I remember he
and I
said that.
talked to Doug about that, and I think I successfully translated the notion, because if you're a visual thinker, then you want to model things in a way that you can visualize them. And the mixing board model is a visual model. And in fact, Temple Grandin used it as a model. For somebody like Doug, who talks in narratives and not in visual models or mathematical models, he doesn't want visual models. They don't work for him, which is perfectly normal. A lot of people work in stories and narratives, and they don't want a mathematical or a visual model. Somebody like Joel does both. He talks about geometric models. He visualizes things geometrically. So what I try to do is sort of bridge the gap between these different ways of reposing models. I happen to be better at the mathematical models than the narrative models. I'm not a very good storyteller, but here's a model of how do you make a story? You have to have some characters. How do you make a character? I needed a model of characters. And I thought, in order to define the characters in my drama, I needed to say, okay, this person has fear of boredom. That person has fear of annihilation. This person has fear of humiliation, and so on. Fill in their fears, and then the kind of emotions that they evince that you can observe. And this is the big mystery. Where are they coming from? What the hell happened to them? As Doug would say, their trauma. What's the earliest experience that you can think of that fits your profile? You know, the things that your idiosyncratic practices. You know, the things that we can always. Oh, he's going to go through this this ritual again. Okay.
Yeah.
And for some people, they'll disclose their beliefs, and some people they'll withhold them. But the more you can fill in correctly the details, the easier it is to have a conversation that's empathetic. Because if you can't identify the emotions, you say, how are you feeling? And they give you a wishy-washy answer. You don't know how they feel because they haven't stated their emotions so that you can say, oh yeah, I get it. You're afraid of being exposed. You're afraid of being revealed as a charlatan. Okay? You're
Yes,
afraid of being revealed
yes.
as a fraud, as a pretender. Okay, but if they don't disclose that, then I have to make a wild guess, and this is a huge space. If you
Oh,
try to
yeah,
make
of
if you
course.
try to make a guess about this, and you were talking, was it yesterday or the day before, guessing at the other guy's intentions and getting them wrong every time?
Yes, well, I was also sort of speaking about that if you're in doubt about the other's intentions, then you want
Right,
to err
exactly.
on the side of generosity
Right.
as a practical
So-
principle.
So one of the things that you took exception to was listening to your correspondent assert the other person's intentions, the third party's intentions, and you're saying, how do you know that's his intentions? Did you ask him?
Yeah, and especially when you assert negative intentions, which can be taken as an insult, which then creates noise in the system and basically just prevents the generative process from
Right.
moving forward.
Right, because instead of talking to the person, you're talking to the chimera of your imagination about them. You've made up a bogus model of this other person, and you're talking to the model in your head, the chimera, instead of the real
Exactly.
person. They're going, who's he talking to? He's got a caricature of me that is, completely off the wall.
But isn't this also a typical example of model thinking that's gone out of control, that is like a mental prison?
That's why I say, to be a scientist, you can form a hypothesis about anything, and then you got to test the hypothesis. You don't just adopt it as if it's the ground truth. You say, maybe he's feeling that, or maybe he wants that. That's a hypothesis. But if you're going to be a scientist, then you submit it to the protocols of the scientific method, the critical thinking. How do I know that? What's my evidence? What is the evidence that would refute that hypothesis? And is there a source that has the ground truth? Who has the ground truth of Glenn's fears? Who has the ground truth of Sam's fears or Doug's? If you just guess at these and then assume that they're correct and talk to a person as if that's them, you're going to be off the mark. You're going to be, the Latin word for missing the mark.
Yes, sin.
Sin. Sin
Yeah,
just means you thought the bullseye was there. It's really over there. You missed the mark by a mile.
Yeah.
Sin just means missing the mark because you don't have an accurate fill in the blank, and you didn't test it to see if they're correct. And if you have somebody who doesn't disclose, somebody who can talk and talk and talk and never answer a single question about filling in the blanks, then I end up with essentially the null model. One time I said to Colin, I said, the best model I have of you is the null model. Makes no mistakes, makes no predictions, no mistakes, but it doesn't tell me anything either.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I say, until I can get some reliable information to fill in these blanks that I can confirm, all I have is the null model. All these are blank. I have filled in this, I don't know this, I don't know this, I don't know this, I don't know this, the null model. And then how do I converse with somebody that's essentially total stranger? How can I have empathy for somebody if I don't even know the name of the emotion they're experiencing?
Well, I don't think one needs to know the name necessarily, but you need to somehow relate to it.
Sense it, yeah.
Yeah, but don't you think also that there's a sort of, maybe there's not a need to overthink some of these things, that if we are perceptive and we sort of remain perceptive over some time and we pick up some pieces of information here and there, especially like in a video with voice, you sort of naturally gather a kind of a general impression.
Right. It took me 8 hours. It took me 8 hours and I got one item out. I got a concept of the definition of conversational people adapter. And a conversational people adapter is basically fill in the blanks here for a character model so that you can engage with that character. This is the soul of a character.
So it's basically a tool to improve the communication with different people.
Yeah, it's just a way to repose it. Now, I would repose it simply by filling in the blanks.
because
Some
I
people
have
want to
a
repose it by some other, memory storage system.
yes, and some want both, right? Because I have a hypothesis that this idea about conversational people adapter is one version of an idea which I would call one of the emergent ideas in the field. And I was in the field of systems thinkers, of GCC conversations, of things I've heard other places, Open Global Mind. I've listened to a couple of their conversations. But it seems that in different forms, this idea comes of having some kind of a profile or some kind of
Right. Exactly.
something built around the name of a person. Even Alex Reed, what he speaks about, I think is a little close to it, even though he focuses on the larger network effects. But I think it's a very big idea here, where in the center you have the name of a specific person, and then around that name you have different information that can assist you in dealing with that person well. But I think it's more than that. I think it's also something that, if it's done right, it focuses on the better angels of their nature, so to say, so that the model also can be an enhancer of the better qualities of a person. So that it's not, it's there's a sort of focus, a preference towards the greater wisdom, you say, or the best qualities a given person has.
Right.
I think that's very interesting.
So this is how I would map. This is how I would make a map or a model of a storybook character.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, the other thing that Colin talks about is a journey map and knowledge trails. Look down here.
Yeah. And
what happens is that when people play out their role, they have a little episode, a drama, a scene, and they make up your Schrecklish life story. Okay, so the journey map is basically what comes out of let the model run, and write down the anecdote, the sketch.
Yes.
So there it is. I mean, it's if you do a biopic of somebody, you present their story. Or you could try to draw what Einstein called some kind of a line, a time-space line through space and time, and your journey through space-time. Or your journey through relationships, whatever you like. But you see, the whole thing is that this is a model, the soul of a character, and I think what he meant by the conversational people adapter was something that reposes the soul of a character, soul of a conversation partner, so that you would know in advance what's going to happen, if you engage on any of these elements of their model, of their character.
Yeah, or at least you can know a little bit. Maybe you will know something that will help you, kind of like a CV, or just having a certain bit of information, like an interviewer who wants to interview someone. They maybe want to read the Wikipedia page, or they want to read a few articles they've written. So they're seeking some kind of information.
The short story of their life, so you know who you're talking to. When somebody like Terry Gross does an interview with a guest, she reads their book, if it's a book, or she reviews them, so she knows enough about this person to have a conversation that's going to be interesting to the audience. She doesn't say, "Oh, here's a stranger, I'm going to have a conversation." She doesn't know what questions to ask if she doesn't do her homework. This is results of
maybe. I'm not totally convinced that is the only approach, because
it isn't the only approach. You couldn't interview somebody cold. That's
Yeah,
what a journalist does.
And there are some people who do that and do it really well, who actually don't want to know anything about the person, and they use that as as an advantage, so to
If
say.
you're a journalist and you're interviewing somebody who's in the news, they could be just an ordinary person in the news who had some experience, and you're interviewing a person cold,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you're
exactly.
going to write the story for the first time. The news story about them.
Yes, yes.
But look,
yeah.
you see the irony, Glenn? The irony is, Glenn says he doesn't believe in a soul, but this is the soul. The conversational people adapter is reposing the soul of a conversational partner, and the journey map is the life journey, and that's the Kabbalah, the passages of life of a. So he's independently reinventing a model of the soul and a model of the Kabbalah, which he doesn't believe in.
Yeah.
Isn't that the irony? He's
Yeah,
in his
that's
own private language, he's constructing a model of the soul and a model of and a version of the Kabbalah. None of which you believe in. That's the irony. That's the part that's so funny to me.
It is funny, and those kind of things
you see me
happen pretty
laughing.
often. I think that kind of stuff happens pretty often, actually.
Sure.
Somebody will say, I don't believe in this, but I believe in this, and you begin building up something which is remarkably similar.
It's the same information reposed in a different representation, because you can represent knowledge many different ways, and you can have two different knowledge representations that you don't realize can retain the same knowledge, but you can map them back and forth one by one. Every element of one knowledge representation maps to the other. And you go, oh, these are simply parallel knowledge representations, or analogs. So he's got an analog of the soul and the analog of the Kabbalah in his own private language, which took me 8 hours to figure out.
Exactly.
And I asked, besides asking Sam and Stacy and Doug whether they understood my summary, I also asked Colin, and Colin declined to answer.
Yeah, I saw he disappeared out of the room, but at that point, the atmosphere was.
No, I don't mean today. I mean, when I asked him, when I first wrote up the model on the morning of January 29th, I showed it to Stacy and I showed it to Colin because they were in the same little chat. And Stacy says, ask Colin did I steel man his concept? Did I represent his concept concisely and accurately? Did I capture it and present it fair and square? Colin declined to respond.
Yeah, I know. And it was probably other reasons.
Which is curious. Why would he say, no, you got it wrong, or yes, you got it right? Didn't answer.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll take it under consideration. That was, 3 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago.
But he's also been speaking about the game of discernment.
You're a little muddy again.
Yeah, he's also been speaking about the game of discernment and about sort of this need to define what we mean with the concepts. Because I just wrote down from. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm just getting a little closer to the speaker.
Yeah, because there was this conversation that I mentioned, Daniel Schmattenberger, Weinstein, and I wrote down a little from the beginning. And at the beginning, they spoke about what it means to be an independent thinker. And Brett said that there's a phenomenon, now I'm quoting, anyone who has learned to think more or less independently tends to have their own language and set of examples that they use to explain things that recur over and over again.
Yes.
So in order to have high quality conversations, there is this period in which we are effectively teaching the other person how I phrase things, and vice versa, obviously. And sometimes seeing those things line up is great. And in the cases where they don't line up, it's even better because there's something to be learned one way or another. Yeah. So let's start here. That was the first thing he said at the beginning of that.
Yeah. And look what it took. I mean, Doug spent 40 minutes trying to re-language, that was Doug's phrase, re-language conversational people adapter into ordinary everyday language that everybody could understand. He didn't succeed in 40 minutes. Took me 8 hours. I'm not as good as Doug. Took 8 hours, and I boiled it down to 2 sentences.
But I got the experience that Doug was having a more particular idea in mind when he did that. It sounded to me, because I heard that part, and it sounded like he had a very particular idea in mind of some way to
Have
it was
empathy.
more like a method. I think Doug was speaking more about a kind of a method for preparing the stage before you say something in order to avoid a trigger. So he sort of had his own idea he was interested in.
Yeah.
I'm not, yeah, but anyway.
Yeah. But
the
poetically,
re-languaging.
it's the soul of a character. Poetically speaking, it's the soul of a character, soul of the party that you're having a conversation with. So you can have empathy for them.
Yeah.
Be on the same wavelength.
Of course. I think it's probably possible to have empathy pretty easily with everyone, but it's also this importance of avoiding misunderstandings and sort of knowing where to focus with a given person.
Yeah.
I don't think that can be captured in a model, but maybe a good model can help.
Well, without a model, I have no
Probably.
way to think. This is the only way I can think about something because I'm a model-based thinker. And there aren't very many people who are model-based thinkers. Sam is. People who are systems thinkers think, I mean, we do model-based reasoning. That is the fundamental tool of scientific and systems thinking. Is you have to construct a model, and then the model can be exercised and computed to make a prediction. And then you see if the prediction holds.
Right, but isn't there something to be said for sometimes just approaching a situation and really having no model at all?
It's where I started from, the null model. I started from the null model.
Yes.
And I was with the null model most of the time. For 4 months, I was with the null model. Didn't have a clue.
Well, maybe the intellect doesn't have a clue, but you know, there's some people who do this really well, but you know, maybe the model is in the way sometimes. It's like even a good one. Maybe the best model is the null model.
That was the best model because it made no mistakes. Made no predictions and no mistakes.
No mistakes.
I never missed the mark because I never made a single prediction because the null model makes no predictions.
Yeah, but it's like it's like if one is just attentive to the situation, if one just perceives in real time what's being said, the way it's being said, you just sort of pick it up. And you don't try to fit it into a model. You're just there and you pick it up and then you just respond.
Right. The first element that I got about Colin is he's a talker. In fact, he's a fabulous. Rush Limbaugh, who just died, could talk for like 2 hours on his daily show, not virtually nonstop. Tucker Carlson can talk for most of an hour on his show. Some people can talk a long time and just, Colin can talk for 8 hours nonstop. Who the hell can do that? That's astonishing. How the hell can anybody talk for 8 hours? But here's the funny thing, and say nothing because I didn't get any information out of it. Not a single question in my mind got answered. Everything that I wanted to know, I got 0 bits of information to resolve any uncertainty in my head, but he could talk for 8 hours and say nothing. That's astonishing. And that's why I came up with that. That's why I came up with that jukebox model, because the jukebox can have a whole bunch of phrases, little sound bites and phrases, and you can just punch them up in some semi-random order and just keep going, like a disc jockey playing the top 40 all afternoon. It repeats like in some random order.
Like a mimetic generator.
Right.
You could say that there's some minds that, at least in
It's got a
sometimes
little,
work.
imagine a jukebox that has an executive function that just does a semi-random play. And every
Yes,
time it gets an incoming phoneme, it just triggers some, little slot in the jukebox and plays starts a sequence going. And you can trigger Colin with practically any word or phrase, and it will just generate one of these semi-random playbacks of a collection in the jukebox.
But don't you think that maybe that's actually very common? That
Yes,
this
it
is
very
actually
common,
how
but not for 8
most
hours.
no, maybe not, but maybe this is how most
Yeah.
people's brains work most of the time.
Script driven. You can trigger a script, and most people, if you trigger a script, the script will maybe be a paragraph.
Hmm.
But to trigger a script that sort of kind of runs semi-randomly for 8 hours, that's astonishing.
Yeah.
And not tell a story, not tell a single story.
Exactly. It's yeah, that is the mimetic generator
Now,
function.
think about politicians who can get up and give a speech to a crowd for 4 hours. There have been 3 or 4 famous politicians of the 20th century who could stand before a huge crowd and just talk for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
Think
right.
about the most famous ones in the 20th century.
Yeah. Yes. Some people do that, like this. Look, and yeah, it's like it just becomes very automatic. It's difficult though to make much sense of it.
They're just playing back a set of sound bites that are coming out of a jukebox. Just punch up some random numbers, and the executive function is just pulling them up automatically. There's not really any thinking involved because it's not coherent. No consilience. It's not coherent.
Yes, and I think there's too little space. It's like a mind that's so filled with thoughts. It just grows continuously. There's no space to just stop and just look at something and consider it.
Yes.
With a little bit of silence, because that really changes everything. It's my experience. The times I really understand something that's really relevant, that's really interesting, is often when there's just a little bit of space and just the answer comes immediately.
Yep.
The answer that's relevant for just that moment. And I think maybe that's part of the skill that needs to be built up in conversation spaces like this, to be able to stop a little bit and just let something sink in
Let it
for
be.
a couple of seconds.
Let it be, and see if you can reduce the entropy of the database. Those long speeches, those monologues and soliloquies and tantrums and diatribes, they're very high entropy because you're not resolving any uncertainty out of them. And what I try to do, when I make these notes with the bullet marks in the chat, I will take maybe a paragraph and boil it down to 1 or 2 words that just succinctly capture the name of what they're talking about. I don't need the expansion into 3 or 4 sentences, because it's the name of the meme.
That's very valuable though. That's really valuable that you write in the chat like that. If we have one person who can write in the chat during the meeting, that really adds enormous value to the document later on. Especially, yeah.
I did a little back of the envelope calculation. If somebody is talking for 12 hours straight, and you make an audio recording, an M4A audio recording, that'll exactly fill up a CD audio.
Okay.
If you talk for 8 hours, it's a little bit more than half of a CD audio. If you transcribe that into text, speech to text, boil down to about less than a floppy disk. It'll boil down to about It's 50,000 words. In 8 hours, you can speak 50,000 words, which will fit on a an audio CD. But if you make a transcript of it in text, it'll fit on about 1/3 of this. Not more
Yeah.
than about 200 kilobytes.
Right.
This is 1 megabytes.
So
So
it's less space
yeah,
with the transcript.
yeah. So you have 8 hours of audio, which is here it is, and
But there's
audio,
obviously
an
less.
audio CD, right?
So there's
And
obviously less
that boils
information.
down to about 10 pages of text. Not even that. I boiled it down to 1 page of text because most of it was gibberish.
Yeah.
If it was a real story, then it would be about 10 pages of text.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doug thought that if he were to narrate a comprehensive biography of somebody like on Facebook, it'd be 5 to 10 pages of text, everything that he thought was relevant to know about that person.
About a given person.
Yeah, about I can't remember. It's about 5,000 words. 5,000 words is about 10 pages of text, I think. Which is 1/10 of a old floppy disk.
Did you, by the way, were you present at some of the deep dive meetings that we had?
No, I think they were before. I first came to these meetings in October.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't think we've had any deep dives since I've been here in like early to mid October.
Because that was one of the ideas that I think was also one of the emergent ideas in the field, as I would say. It's sort of an idea that very strongly connects to all the interests of all the people in the room, because we did quite a lot of exploration into what are you interested in, what do you want to do, and then we came up with this idea of the deep dive conversation, and Doug was very interested in that, and he was present when we had that, and Sam went for 10 sessions, I think. And that was in the barn racing.
Okay,
I had 3 sessions.
Yeah,
I had 3 sessions. I think Alex had 1 or 2. Colin had 1 or 2. But I don't think we necessarily did it all that well. But that was very interesting, because that really is the format, is that you have one person who's sort of the center of attention, and then that person can really tell anything they want to tell, and the others can listen and ask questions, and then out of that a document might be created.
Yeah.
So
Michael Josephus is actually just the week before he died. In fact, right up to the morning that he died, he was proposing that I do that I take all this material that I've been showing on this model of emotions and learning and drama theory and all that stuff. He thought that we should turn that into a course over a period of time. It's really about a semester's worth of graduate level content. It's not really 20 minutes worth. But he thought we should have that. And I was chatting with him in Messenger about, is this realistic? Can we do it on Zoom? Do I need to be in a classroom with I can see people face to face and right on the blackboard? Can we do this on Zoom? And we were talking about, and I also asked him the question, how young can a person be and still be able to get something out of this? Because this is grade level stuff. And he says his granddaughter had just done the SAT exams, and she got a really high score, and she's good in analytical thinking subjects. And I said, do you think? I said, Michael, do you think you could take any of this material at all, just one snippet of it, and explain it to your granddaughter, and that she would be able to understand it? And he said, yes. I said, great. Experiment. You've just made a prediction. Let's do some science. Take a unit of this that's about 20-minute unit. Take it to your granddaughter, present it, and see if she understands it, and find out if your prediction is correct. He died that day. That was the last thing we talked about.
Whoa. Yeah.
He was gonna try that experiment with his granddaughter, and that was like 9:30 a.m. that Tuesday morning, and that's the last anybody. I may have been the last person to talk to him that day.
Yeah. And
See,
he was so interested in these PMOOCs or these massive online courses. I remember
right.
I chatted with him
Yeah.
about that too. And
And he thought this material was suitable for this audience.
I think so, because I think that's a really great idea. And I'm sure Sam will be positive to it, that you can take at least one of the Saturday sessions.
Yeah.
I think this is really good for the Saturday barn racing session.
What I would really like to see happen is for somebody else to present, to take a chunk of it.
Okay, yeah, okay, yeah.
So
That would be
I mean,
interesting.
I might do a survey of it and then say, in fact, Stacy did that. You know, Stacy took the drama theory section and she wrote a medium.com essay that was inspired just by the drama theory material. And was she the first person to do that? She's not the first person to understand the model, but she's the first person here in this GCC culture to do something with it. You know, so Josepha Woods wanted to do something with it, died. Stacy about a year ago. Oh, you know who else did some stuff? Baby Wunderman.
Maybe, yeah.
Unbeknownst to me, she had been pulling stuff off my blogs, including this material and some other stuff. She had been folding material for me in her blogs for a year and a half. I didn't even know it.
Yeah, that's amazing. She's she's also, there's a couple of things I wrote that she asked if she could use it, and of course I said, and I think that's so interesting. That is a really interesting way to learn, to really study one set of ideas from another person and then try to present it. That another person can try to present it, and one can do that back and forth over a longer period of time. And I think this is a model for collective intelligence, where we really can continuously expand the knowledge base, or let's say a body of ideas that a given person has, that they can understand their own ideas better when they hear others present them, and when they have this kind of an interaction. Because that's the goal of the deep dive, is really that person themselves understand their own things much better as well.
Right.
While also others can learn and they can get inspired. So it can be this really dynamic learning thing that happens.
I would be thrilled if anybody took any little chunk of this material, because this is a semester's worth of material, take any chunk of it they like and present it in like a 20-minute presentation, 20-minute presentation, and maybe answer some questions. If that could happen, boy, I would die happy.
Okay. Hey, I'm up to take the challenge. I'll have to, have some time to prepare, but I did create a page based on the links you shared in the chat to the blog. And that would be really interesting. And I think it would be a great thing for the Saturday barn racing to have at least one session, maybe several. But is there any specific part of your work which you feel is of special interest, or do you think would be especially interesting for us in this context?
Well, you saw the part that I gave you today. Let me just show you the table of contents so you can kind of see the scope of it. Let me just scroll up to the top here. So after I define my terms, the main thing is that this is fundamentally, this is about the interplay of emotions and learning. So it's about learning, and it's about emotions and about how they act together. And then I begin with an analogy that's based on ordinary motion, ordinary things in motion: time, distance, velocity, acceleration, jerk and jounce, the basic calculus of motion. I use that as the grounding, and I map everything in ordinary motion to a learning journey. Take every term in ordinary motion and say, what's the corresponding word dictionary word in a learning journey.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then I expand into the bardic arts. If you understand just straight learning, can you then use that to write stories with characters, you know, that interact and some of them are learning? This is what I showed you today, Clancy's theorem, that vexagon diagram. And then I had some other stuff that's, you know, just side stuff. But let me just show you the analogy. Here it is. Here's ordinary motion. You have time, distance traveled, the speed and direction in which you're traveling, the acceleration, which is speeding up, slowing down, and changing direction. Newton actually named the next derivative jerk. And people at MIT named the next derivative after that, jounce. Okay. So you have the first derivative velocity, second derivative acceleration, third derivative jerk, and the fourth derivative jounce. And if you're making a fleet of quadcopters and they all want to fly in unison, you have to minimize these guys, and then they can fly in unison. And here's my analogy: time is still time. Gaining ground is gaining ground with knowledge, gaining units of knowledge. The rate at which you gain ground, we just simply call that learning. That's the speed, right? You learn fast, you learn slow. Acceleration, speeding up, slowing down, and changing directions. This is the key idea. We call those emotions. Emotions is what changes the rate or direction of learning. Just like acceleration changes velocity, emotions change the direction and speed of learning. What they call jerk in ordinary motion, shock. And this is important. Jounce is resilience. And there's a lot of new stuff about resilience. So once you have this analogy, if you know enough calculus or simply familiarity with ordinary motion, you can simply map them over here. And what does that do if you draw a diagram? You put time on this axis. You put cumulative knowledge and beliefs, because beliefs can be incorrect. They can be misconceptions. And so over time, you're building up a body of knowledge that may include some misconceptions, some erroneous beliefs. And if you have erroneous beliefs, your expectations aren't met because your predictions aren't met. And so you become surprised or confused or disappointed. Remember, Sam kept saying disappointed? So when you're disappointed, you say, something that I'm expecting to happen from my knowledge isn't happening. And then you have to diagnose the misconceptions and discard the beliefs that are not valid. And then you start replacing them with a better model. And you have this, so now you have wiggles. See, people usually draw a learning curve as just ascending and flattening out. No, they got wiggles in them because you have misconceptions. As soon as you put in the wiggles, you have the second derivative. The wiggles are the second, and they are experienced as emotions. And then if you do something even fancier, you plot acceleration versus velocity, plot emotions versus learning, you get a phase plane. Classical deep idea in calculus, the phase. Plot one derivative against the other. Plot the first derivative against the second derivative. First derivative, you're ascending, because that's literally what it means. Then if you go over here to the second quadrant, now you're descending. You're slowing down, and then you're descending. And then over here, you're turning back around. So you go around this phase plane cyclically. Why? Because that's what a sinusoid does. It's cyclical. It ascends, then the second derivative goes negative, then you descend, then the second derivative goes positive, then you ascend. Those are your phases. It's like phases of the moon.
Wave.
So, any wave has phases. It doesn't have to be a perfect sinusoid. And so the learning journey goes through these 3-4 phases. And so can you just figure out what phase is somebody in? And people tend to get stuck. They get stuck. They get stuck because they won't discard. They fail to discard a misconception. They hang on to this erroneous belief like their life depends on it, and they get stuck here. That's dispirited, frustrated, dispirited, because they won't discard misconceptions. That's the critical thinking. As soon as you discard the misconceptions, you say, I thought I knew everything. Now I didn't realize I was stupid. Then you go over here.
Yeah.
You grieve your losses, and then you go over here and do fresh research, and you keep going around this. Every time you go around it, you're ascending this thing. The envelope is ascending, but at any point, you're not at the envelope because you've got misconceptions to get rid of. Okay.
And are you considering this always in relation to making accurate predictions?
Yes. Expectations that are being met. Understanding the world as it is and not as you would like to imagine it in a flight of fancy.
Yeah.
If you're going to do a flight of fancy, write science fiction or fairy tales. Because in fairy tales, you can have anything happen you want. But if you want to model the way the real world works, the way the world's going to treat you as a real person, then you don't want to be living in a fairy tale imaginary world where the world doesn't agree with your imagination. You can do both. You can be a scientist and get accurate models, or you can be a writer of drama, fairy tales and science fiction, whatever you like, novels, and they don't have to agree with the way the world really works.
But how would it fit in if let's say you write a fairy tale, and the purpose of the fairy tale is to change the trajectory of the world? So let's say, for example, that you write a story about yourself in the next 10 years, and the character is yourself, and
you can, or it could be an avatar that partly resembles. It could be a mix.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, think of, do you know Harold and the Purple Crayon? That's a great, beginner story, because it's only got one character in it. It's just Harold, and he's got a purple crayon, and he really draws the story as he lives it. It's a very simple children's story, and it's been animated. It's a very short little children's book, and you can find an animated version of it on YouTube, Harold and the Purple Crayon. By the way, Harold is Colin's real first name.
Okay, yeah, that's right. I didn't know that, actually, but that's pretty interesting. So
it was Joel who found all of the meanings of all of our names, and Colin turns out to mean a whelp or a puppy.
Okay.
A young pup. Colin in Gaelic means young pup.
Okay.
And Kayla means feminine, I think, right? You said.
Yeah,
and Caroline means.
Caroline means womanly.
Yeah. Free spirit.
Kayla means something. They all have different meanings.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's actually kind of interesting, because the one word that really triggers you is hearing your own name. You hear your own name a lot. And any word that sounds like your name, you hear that too. Homonyms you hear. And if you know what your name means, in terms of, then that also affects how you think, because you think more about stuff that connects to your name or the meaning of your name.
Yes, and probably you're going to be a completely different person if you're born with one name as compared to another name, because also associations with people in society. For example, if you have a very unusual name,
yes,
I think it's a larger chance that you will be more of an eccentric character, perhaps.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. People will research things that come to their attention either because they're researching their own name, or they're researching words that sound like their name.
Yes. So yeah, exactly. It's
I mean, look at Sam. Sam's full name would be Samuel. And
exactly.
Joel looked it up. I double checked it. Samuel, any name that ends with EL, the ending of a name that ends in EL. EL is just the Hebrew word for God. Literally most high. It's a pronoun that references the most high. Samuel means told by God. And there was a character in the Old Testament who was told by God to anoint Saul as the first king of Israel. And the name Saul Oh, I already forgot what Saul means. Oh yeah, Saul means to ask, to question or to ask. And so Samuel anoints Saul as the first king of Israel, and Israel, ends in L, means wrestles with God. But God,
Okay.
L really means the spirit of becoming, if you really expand, because that was the most divine
That
thing.
document, I really like that document you wrote about the spirit of becoming, where
Right.
you showed several examples of processes of becoming.
Yeah. So the asker, Saul the asker, is the leader of those who wrestle with the spirit of becoming, the process of becoming. And here we are in GCC wrestling with what are we becoming?
Yes, yes.
It's just a different language, but it's exactly the same process.
Yes, exactly. It's we're wrestling with the spirit. Yeah.
And that is what you get out of religion. All you do is you go back and say, how did they talk about this in the languages of 3,500 years ago? They're talking about the same thing. In fact, their names are the little the little bullet points of what you're writing down, you know.
Ayla, did you want to say something there?
Yeah, I heard very, very briefly say something about this. I didn't see the diagram because I was heating up food.
Oh, I can put it back up if you like. In fact, it is up, isn't it?
Oh,
just
is it?
yeah.
I wanted to see your faces first.
Oh,
but it was something.
I could take this down again if you like.
You said this is how you see the world, as opposed to how you want the world to be, or this is how the world is, as opposed to how you want the world to be. I think I heard you say something like that.
Yeah, what I said was,
we spoke about that. Yeah.
That's interesting.
You form a mental model of how the world is in your imagination before you've lived the world. You imagine it, and you imagine it from sources like children's stories and, you know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that the world is a lot more challenging and puzzling and unlovely than a child has in their mind. And so you have expectations which aren't met. You imagine yourself falling in love and living happily ever after, and it doesn't happen. You imagine having a beautiful family and great friends, and nobody ever betrays you, and nothing bad happens, and then bad stuff happens. So you realize that you have to replace your unrealistic expectations so that you don't keep getting disappointed by more realistic, more mature mental models that more carefully and more closely characterize the way the world really is. So you don't keep running into brick walls all the time.
Can I just say, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
That most children actually do see the world as it is, and they see the beauty of it as it is. Like, well, I shouldn't say that, because not all of it is entirely
to middle school. Yeah. School. Everything goes to hell in a handbasket.
Well, like my cousins, well, my niece, really cute, sweet kid. She loves obese women. These huge obese women. She just gravitates. She loves them. You know?
Rubenesque women.
Yes.
Rubenesque.
And she just, and it's beautiful to see this beautiful little girl just want to gravitate towards these women, these huge women. And so I think that children actually have it from the beginning, you know, where, and it's just that confusion with society.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because I wasted 3 hours binge watching this show called Bridgerton. Okay, and talking about triggers, that triggered me, because I was like, oh, why are we talking about something in the 1800s, you know, women swooning over men, and you have to find a husband, and that's all you're there to do. I'm like, oh no, not another one, you know. But it wasn't really done in a realistic time frame, which is bothersome, because in reality,
so I'm going to spoil it if you really want to watch it.
If it's on Netflix, I don't have Netflix. So.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's about this really, pretty girl just wanting a husband, and this husband, of course, is a broken guy, and he's got all these issues, but he's super handsome, and they've got these problems, and then suddenly they're happily married and in love after overcoming them in a course of a couple of weeks. And that is not realistic.
Exactly.
I hate that. It is.
Exactly.
It's just like, you know what I like? If you've watched Legends of the Fall,
Haven't seen it.
Brad Pitt.
Oh no, haven't seen it.
Okay. Well, I think it's a good movie, but he goes through these years where he has to find himself. Goes through these trials and snippets of things. He goes into a ship and has like a twosome with some Asian women, and somebody robs him somewhere else, and it's this lifestyle, this lifespan. You see him with this beard, you see him without the beard, and then he comes back and he's like, okay, you know what, I'm ready to have kids and a wife now. That's realistic. None of this fast fairy tale bullshit that you just like, and I had to explain that to my son because he didn't want to read Harry Potter. And I said, Harry Potter has all these wonderful, cool things in it when you read it, and has all these little details, and everything just happens in a big, he's just like, well, how come I can't see it in a movie? What's wrong with the movie? I said, well, the movie is just a brief synopsis of, a book is much better if you can read it. And plus, a movie is not real life. It's just a condension of a story. That's it. So when you were talking about how you see the world and everything, that was really interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
I like it, how the world really is. It's not all of this fairy tale, we fall in love and you could fix a woman or a man or, in weeks, or, it's a lifetime. Your guy goes to AA, comes back, is cool. That's years. And it's awful that people are portraying these fantasies and saying, no, it can't happen. It can really happen. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, I'm done.
It's a long
Did you
journey.
happen to watch the ABC TV series Once Upon a Time, 7 seasons long?
No, I didn't.
I think you would find that very interesting because it sounds like it's a children's story, but it's a story for all ages. It's fabulously written, but it was on Netflix. I think it's now on. Oh, I forget what it's on now. In Xfinity, I think has it. Or what I was doing is that when it became unavailable on Netflix, I just went to the local library and got the DVDs because it's now like 12 years old or 14 years old. So you don't have to wait in line to get the DVDs. Get like one DVD a month and you can watch a whole season in a month easily.
Yeah, it's good to have a good library.
What do you
Close
look
by.
closely at?
Oh.
I was just making sure that I'm on mute because I'm going to be eating.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
I've
didn't want
also
you
been
guys to
eating.
hear.
But it's been eating. It's just it doesn't bother
Yeah,
me.
sorry, I've also been eating.
Okay.
I actually have to go to bed now, but yeah. Anyway, guys.
Aw,
Yeah, lovely talking to you guys. So
nice talking to you too.
yeah, good night.
Thanks for the chat, Glenn. I appreciated it.
Yeah, we'll talk later about that deep dive. Barry.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe you
let's
can
do
be
it.
the pioneer and be the first one to take us. But you get your choice of section.
Yeah. Let's do it. Definitely. Okay. Bye.
Bye bye.
Oh, I get a one-on-one with Barry.
We're here to talk about anything you want to talk about.
Well, what happened? Colin left the room. Sam's picture is up there.
Yeah. Because he's recording.
You guys were, yeah, I see. You guys were talking about Doug's unblocking and what it transpired, and
yeah, because Doug kind of constrained the content of the session to his agenda. He had a very specific agenda. So anytime anybody drifted away from the bullseye of his agenda, Doug shut him down. Sam came at the end and wanted to talk a little bit about models. Sam and I both went to Stanford in grad school. And so we are model-based reasoners. That's our discipline. And Doug was sort of poo-pooing using models. Doug likes to do narratives. There's a famous quote from Umberto Eco. I don't know if you recognize his name, but
Yes.
yeah. So he says, whereof we cannot express a theory, we must narrate a story instead. And most people will say, oh, story, forget that. I don't want theory. I'm the other way around. I want theory first, and then I can figure out how to make it into a story. And you can take a lot of stories and extract out of it an underlying theory, a model that characterizes all the stories. And I would rather have the theory because that's the way my brain works. I can store a theory and I can't memorize all the humanities literature. There's a ton of literature in the humanities. There's no way that I could process all that and get anything out of it. But if you could pull out a model of human sociocultural dynamics, which has been done, that's a half a page. Fabulous, I'm done. So in fact, that model is an extension. When I was at Stanford, there was a professor of humanities who I didn't know. I was in engineering, so I'm not taking humanities. There was a professor who looked at all of the classical literature of civilization, all the Greek literature, all the literature in the English language, all the scriptures, everything that was story, regardless of source. He looked at tons and tons of literature, the Russian realists like Dostoevsky and all these, and he pulled out a very succinct model that will fit on a half a page that characterizes the dynamics of every generic story. His name was Girard. He's French, René Girard. And he came up with a model that's named after him, Girard's model. And I learned about it in the late 1990s. And Girard was an atheist. And when he got his model of human social cultural dynamics, he realized that not only did this model capture the essence of the body of all human literature, it especially captured the passion story of the New Testament. That was the best fit to his model. And he became a Christian, but not a Christian who is a believer. It's like if you go into math class and the professor writes the Pythagorean theorem up on the blackboard, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And the professor says, here's the Pythagorean theorem, behold and believe. Now, if this is a real math class, students will say, excuse me, professor, suffer us the proof. Why should we believe this? Show us systematically, logically, why this is accurate and not just something coming down on stone tablets from on high. And what Girard's model does, it's a model, it's a systems theoretic model, a computable model of the way humans behave. And if you solve it for best practices, let's say that you don't like violence. You'd rather have a culture that doesn't have violence. You don't like oppression. You'd rather have a culture that doesn't have oppression. You don't like injustice. You'd rather have a culture that doesn't have injustice. And you make a list of all these things that are about poverty, oppression, injustice, corruption, abuse. You make a list of all the things that you'd like to get rid of. And then you would say, according to Girard's model of how people behave, how can I dial down all these unwanted things? And you compute the solution is the teachings of Moses, Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tzu, Confucius, Dalai Lama, Gandhi, King. You literally solve this model for ethical best practices, and you compute the teachings of the world's great religions. So it's not handed down from some authority figure. It's like solving a math problem. And you can test this model. You can say, take Girard's model and say, there's an episode. Does it fit? It fits the model. There's another episode. Fits the model. And so when people don't think, they run the model in the escalating direction. If they know the model, they can reason to run the model in the de-escalating direction. To dial down conflict, violence, oppression, injustice, corruption, poverty, ignorance, alienation, abuse, suffering, and terrorism. Now, you believe the teachings, but you didn't take it on faith. Just like you didn't take the Pythagorean theorem on faith. You understood logically, analytically why it's correct. That's called analytic theology. Also, I also call it theomathy, not the word of God, but the math of God.
Yeah, I've heard you say that word before.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, I made up the word because I say the word of God is a narrative. It's a bunch of stories. Why? Because
Yeah.
most people won't sit for a theory. It's too abstract. But if you go to if you're at MIT and you go into the little coop where you can buy books and gear, if you're studying electrical engineering, like I and Colin both study electrical engineering theoretically, you go into the MIT coop and you get a sweatshirt or a T-shirt that has Maxwell's equations on it. Maxwell's equations are these very arcane mathematical equations that define the photon of light. And so you have these four Maxwell's equations, and it says, and God said, Maxwell's equations, and there was light. Theomathy. And God said some math, and there was light. Literally, I mean, it's Maxwell's equations for radio and light, and and who knows that kind of stuff? You got to be like an MIT engineer to even appreciate that.
It was funny. I knew you made that word up. Joshua was like, I'm pretty sure he didn't make that. He probably knows all the words in the dictionary. I'm like, he made that up.
Did you see the other word that I made up recently?
Which one?
So the antonym of satori, satori is sudden, a moment of enlightenment.
Yeah.
I couldn't find a good antonym for it. The antonym was like unenlightened or darkness, which I think is not a very good antonym. So I wanted to make up a new antonym for satori. So I made up one, nasori, which is also, I just made up the word, but it's also an acronym. And I
really?
I didn't give it away. I said, can anybody figure out what you can expand NASORI to that works? The opposite of a sudden moment of enlightenment, satori, the opposite of nasori, a prolonged state of not ever becoming enlightened, in the dark for a long time.
You think that's even, well?
Now,
yeah,
I've actually written this phrase quite a number of times. I've put this in chat. I've said it. I've actually used this expression, this expansion of NASORI. I've used this a lot. So far, nobody has guessed it. So I can either leave it to you to find it, or I could disclose it.
Just disclose it. If no one's guessed it, I will not guess it.
Not a source of reliable information. Not a source of reliable information. In
I
the
like
dark,
that.
in the dark, unenlightened, in the dark, they have not experienced satori. They have not become enlightened. They are not a source of, and I said that to Colin. I said, Colin, you're not a source of reliable information. I said it to him many times. He isn't. He's not a source of reliable information.
You know, it's interesting the Colin and Jez Winder thing. And I know I'm talking about Colin.
Okay.
Whatever. Jez Winder does not like when Colin interrupts.
Nobody likes to be interrupted.
Yeah. However, today I found it really interesting that he said, people need to speak their minds. So Colin needs to speak his mind. And I don't know if it takes 8 hours straight for him to just speak his mind about whatnot. But like, I almost wanted to tell Jez Winder, well, isn't that what he's doing? He's speaking his mind. So if you want somebody to speak their mind, but you don't want to interrupt them, and you want somebody to block them or mute them, wouldn't it go against what you're saying?
you know? So I just found that kind of curious today when I was listening. And I was trying to figure out what Doug was, because I had a few examples and I didn't have the correct focus to bring it to the group, just because I went to my old house and I had to move furniture and still pack and stuff like that. But you know, I guess next week I would love to see what he was trying to achieve with the triggering and unblocking. You know, it is Doug's rules, it's his day, it's his thing, but I just needed a little bit more clarification.
Yeah.
You know, a little bit more narrowing of the subject.
He wanted a social contract so that he could tamp down this triggering phenomenon where things were just going off the rails all the time. He finally realized that you need some method to construct a culture where things don't just keep going off the rails. And the answer is you need a social contract with mutually agreeable terms of engagement. Not a complicated idea.
It isn't. It's a big project though. And I'll say that just because I'm becoming very mindful of other people. Like I said today.
You're becoming.
Yeah, becoming.
That's the English word.
Normally,
That is the
I'm
translation
not.
of the deed of the Old Testament. You are becoming.
Yeah.
I love it. See?
You know, and okay, so I met this gentleman on a dating app, and he was a reporter. And I like that because you don't really meet highly intelligent people on dating apps. You know, not to say that he is highly intelligent. So he had asked what I normally, in my profile, I said something like, I try to strive towards peace, and, you know, I'm involved in things that try to better your community. And he said, well, what have you done? Yeah.
Peacemaking, which is New Testament.
Yes.
Jesus was a peacemaker. Moses wanted to dial down violence. Buddha wanted to dial down suffering. Jesus wanted to dial down violence and what else? Well, all those negative things.
Yeah. So he said, well, what have you done? And I said, well, I can tell you. And, you know, I think you already know this, but I've hosted 2 Talanoa dialogues on the Black Lives Matter and Me Too.
Yeah.
And he just went off on like, oh, you and I would not go well together with your whole like political thing. And I'm pretty sure he won't agree with me, but he goes on, just, it was paragraphs. And I was like, wow, you know, so I was reading and I'm thinking he completely missed the point.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying I agree with any of the political things that I host or the topics. I was just hosting it in the matter of the Talanoa dialogue.
Yeah.
And so that was a triggering point. However, I started to think to myself, like, well, this is really interesting from a Black man who does not like the Black Lives Matter, who is a reporter, who supposedly is informed underground, you know. And so I said, you know, I'm really sorry that you feel this way. And I was as nice as I could be. And this is very refreshing to at least talk to somebody and hopefully we can agree to disagree. And that is what peacemaking is all about.
Yeah.
And so he gave me his number and everything, but he has not yet disclosed to me his opinions on BLM. And it's exhausting.
Yeah. Can you
it
give
is
me a minute to
exhausting.
take a bathroom break?
Yeah, go.
Thank you.
I just got back with coffee.
Yeah. I know. I'm sorry. I hope I'm not triggering you. I'm drinking some wine.
I actually I just heard about the last 30 seconds here, hearing that Barry had to go take a pee break. But I've been having breakfast and I've been getting my coffee, so I didn't catch most of what was going on here.
No, I was, you know, and I'll say this to Barry when he comes back. I just wanted to disclose that trying to do yourself do better is exhausting. It's like it's like this exchange of energies of trying to be like, okay, well, you know.
Okay, so if you did,
Princess. Ah.
what's easier to do? Just let go and just, what would you do if you just let go?
I would tell that gentleman that he is full of himself and that he is not a good listener and he's probably not as smart as he thinks. That is immediately what comes to my mind because I got
And,
triggered at his trigger.
and what kind of consequence would that produce, and can you live with it?
It would just, you know, the door is shut for the conversation that I want. The door would definitely be shut, locked, and non-existent.
Who is this person, by the way? I don't know who this is.
Oh, just some gentleman I met on Tinder, you know.
Oh, was it the
I
guy
just-
that? Oh, never mind.
What? Which one?
You shared a
One that fell
screenshot
in
one
love.
time.
Yeah, ew, no. So Barry, I was just coming to the conclusion that to do us better, as Doug says, is exhausting and time consuming.
It's very time consuming. There's a great quote from a short piece by Raymond Smullyan, he died recently, but he's a well-known philosopher logician, and I loved his work. He wrote a dialogue between two characters, and the title of the dialogue is God a Taoist? And it's the two characters are named Mortal and God. And it opens with the mortal in prayerful supplication. Dear God, if you have an ounce of mercy for this, your poor soul, please relieve me of the burden of having free will.
Yeah.
And then there's this
Right?
long conversation, you know, and in the middle of the conversation, Sam will appreciate this. The mortal is beginning to wonder if he's really talking to God or if he's talking to some, you know, figment of his own imagination. So the mortal says, how do I know who you really are? That I'm really talking to the real God. And God laughs. And the mortal says, why are you laughing? And he says, I'm not laughing at your question. I'm laughing because of who you're asking it of. Imagine that there's a charlatan pretending to be somebody, and you say, are you the real Kayla? Or doesn't matter. You're going to get the same answer. If it's the charlatan, they're also going to say, so the joke is you're asking the right question, but not of the right person. So then the mortal goes on to try to get a better idea of who or what God is that he's, you know, imagining in his head.
Mm-hmm.
And God says, well, a lot of people call me the cosmic consciousness, but he says, that's not very good. So the mortal says, well, how can I sense you? And God says, well, it'd be more accurate to say that I am your senses. The mortal's still not quite satisfied. So he asks for more, you know, more information. So finally, God says to the mortal, he says, the best definition that you mortals can cast of me at this stage of your development is that I am the very process of enlightenment. And what you choose to call the devil, and I wish you wouldn't, is the unfortunate length of time the process takes. It takes a lot of time.
It
A
does.
lot of time.
It does. But it's cool. I kind of like the notion, you know. Some people may not agree, but I like playing around with what Doug has planted in my head this morning. You know, especially when he said, I don't want to bring up gender either, because I started to think about like, oh yeah, that's actually what I was thinking of. How can we frame things without gender based? But then again, that there's also discernment. You have to discern man and woman, and you know, there's obvious differences.
Well, if you want to procreate, it makes a difference.
Well, yeah, you know, moving furniture, like I get really jealous because I've been moving furniture and I'm pretty sure me moving it is probably half as slow as as if a man would do it.
Except
You know?
me. Not really.
So, I'll bring up some of my issues next week, unless somebody else has some really good issues.
Yeah.
But I would love to. I think it's great that that to elevate as a society. And I love what you said about seeing the world as it is, as opposed to your fantasies. And I think for the most part, a lot of people are stuck in their fantasy.
And that's important for survival, because we have to
Mhm.
survive in the world as it is, not as we imagine it. And if we have, misconceptions about how the world is, we're liable to walk off a cliff, blow ourselves up, destroy our habitat.
The funny thing about survival too is that's changed as well.
Yep.
People think of, oh my gosh, yeah, we could survive. So now what? Well, no. Definition of survival. It wasn't like it was thousands of years ago.
7.5 billion of us on this planet, and we're changing the climate of the planet because there's so many of us, and we're burning up, so much energy.
Yeah.
And you notice that it doesn't just mean that the average temperature goes up, the variance goes up, the extremes get bigger, and that's what's happening in Texas.
Yeah.
It's because the extreme weather becomes more and more extreme. The variance and the mean go up together. So the distribution gets wider. It doesn't always slide to the right, it also gets wider. That's a lot of people don't get, they look at the first term, they don't look at the second term of the model, which is the variance. More
no one's interested until it affects them.
That's the problem scientists have. Scientists can make predictions from reasonably good models. And there have been people who do that function. I mean, in old times, they were called sages, prophets, seers, visionaries. They've always been people who could do model-based reasoning. They didn't call it that, but they had that faculty. They could see what's coming. They could see the patterns, and they could see where the pattern is going. Only in the 20th century did we, call it systems theory. It's just a new term. But the founders of the great religions, they were systems thinkers. I look back and I say, how far back can I go to find the origins of my discipline, systems thinking? I go, criminality. You got to go all the way back to the founders of the world's great religions. They were fabulous systems thinkers. When I was in grad school, I took a course in feedback control theory, which is a very mathematical, technical course in how to build feedback control systems. And we had the fundamental theorem of feedback control theory. It says, what do you have to have before you can have a system that you can control? And that was the fundamental theorem gave the answer. And half of the answer knocked my socks off. Imagine you're in your car and you've got all the controls are there. The steering wheel works, the pedals all work, everything works, but you can't see out the windshield. You're blinded. Can you drive the car?
Unless it's a smart car. No, of course you can't. You can't.
Being able to bear accurate witness to your current state is absolutely essential. Where do we find bearing accurate witness? It's right there in the 10 Commandments. If you don't take accurate measure of your reality, or you report inaccurate measure, you screw up the freaking feedback loop. It's right there. Half of the theorem of feedback control theory is in the 10 Commandments. They were systems thinkers. Witness is a big word. Bearing accurate witness is a huge, huge thing. That's why I get upset, and Sam gets when somebody doesn't bear accurate witness, and they start telling lies. Because then it drives people to do the wrong thing, because they don't have a correct perception of reality. Gaslighting, for example, is a classical example of not bearing accurate. This is a really, really, that's about as closest to evil as you can think of.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, you can send people to war by not bearing accurate witness of what's the real threat. So
yeah,
that's pretty
nothing
deep
drives
stuff,
me
but,
crazy.
Yeah.
When somebody gaslights me, or
Yeah. The thing is that we are mature enough to recognize being gaslit most of the time. You can tell when somebody is feeding you a bunch of baloney. But try to get them to appreciate that they're feeding you a bunch of baloney. You know, what, I mean, at the end of 8 hours, Colin kept saying, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. And I say, I'm not listening to you. I'm not listening to you. I'm not listening to you. Why? Because you're not a source of reliable information. You're not a source of reliable information. You're not a source of reliable information. You're not a scientist. I'm not listening to you. You're not a source of I'm not listening to you. And finally, I think he got the message. I wasn't listening to him.
So my question, Barry,
sure,
is why do you and Colin continue to engage?
Actually, what I was just telling that story, that goes all the way back to January 28th. That's not recent. That's January 20th. That's like 3 weeks ago, right? That's at the end of that 8 hour night.
But you're still continuing to engage.
Yeah, that's true. But I am engaging by going perpendicular to his direction. I'll tell you a story. I once had.
No, wait. You're responding to pretty much every post he posts, but you're not responding to the point he's trying to make.
Exactly.
So that's why he calls it toying with.
I don't care what he calls it. He can make up any fantasy, flight of fancy, chimera of his imagination.
Okay, but let me ask you, do you do that with anyone else?
Not lately, because there isn't anyone else lately.
Right. So if someone else actually experienced that from you, how would they receive you? How would they experience you?
I'd have to think about that, because usually I can't eke out their affective emotive state of if they don't disclose it directly.
No, I think you could probably do so.
I don't know how accurate it would be.
It's okay. An approximation is fine.
Well, they would say I'm not
Because
paying
you're doing
attention.
it for a purpose.
They would probably say you're not paying attention to me.
Right. You're doing it for a purpose, but it's not obvious to the person whom you're responding to. So Colin has no idea what you're doing with him, even though he calls it toying with, and you are just acknowledging that you're not responding to what he's asking or talking about. You're going on an orthogonal direction.
Correct.
Right. So is that a successful mode of interaction?
I don't know yet, because it's too new.
It's been going on for days. Several.
Well, yeah, but not 8 hours yet.
Well, I think you suspect where I'm going with this, and I'm still trying to figure out what it is you think you're going to get out of this, or what you think Colin's going to get out of this.
Oh, I don't know for sure, but I know what I'd like to get out of it.
Which is?
I want to understand anomalies. He's an anomaly, and I study anomalies. Because if I look at my model doesn't predict Colin. My model is nowhere near Colin, but he's a real person.
So maybe it's an incomplete model.
It is an incomplete model. All models are incomplete.
Okay.
It doesn't handle it. See, when you have a model and it predicts the middle of the distribution very nicely, but there's tails, and somebody who's way out on the tails of the distribution, your model won't catch that. It's like Mercury. Newton's model of gravity didn't catch Mercury. There was something anomalous about Mercury, and Colin's an anomaly. And I want to know, can I figure out enough about the tails of the distribution where I have practically no data to tweak the model to make it more complete, so it covers the more unusual cases that the model's not doing me any good.
Okay, so Colin's a science experiment, not really a conversation partner.
Oh, you can't have a conversation with him. There's no way.
Anyway, he thinks that there's a conversation taking place.
I don't care what he thinks.
Aw.
He might think that.
I'm just saying, you guys are going at different cross purposes, and you're both choosing to continue to engage, and you both seemingly don't understand the other. So I'm just wondering why the continued willingness to.
Do you know why I want to understand him? I don't remember if you were present when I laid out why I want to understand things that I don't understand, especially people.
Present.
Were you present when I did the 5-step process for dealing with bullies?
Yes.
You've been doing that a couple times, I think.
Okay, so I don't have to repeat it. Okay, so I get stuck at stage 3, which is understanding. And now there are people, especially devout Christians, who can say, I will forgive my adversary even if I don't understand why they're doing it. They'll just ritually forgive somebody for, whatever bad things they're doing. I find it very hard to forgive somebody unless I understand why they're doing what they're doing. I need a model.
Is that necessary though?
It's not necessary if you're somebody who simply says, I'm going to follow this recipe from whoever, the Christian teachings or whatever you get it from. And there are people who say, there's no way I'm going to understand this person, so I'm just going to go ahead and forgive them.
But isn't there a notion of forgiveness? This may not be the notion that you're subscribing to, but there is a notion of forgiveness that has nothing to do with the other person.
Well, there's also forgiving yourself.
No, you're not responding to what I was saying. I said there is a notion of forgiveness that has nothing to do with what the other person is doing. In other words, it's in the past. That person has already done it. The act of forgiveness is an act you're choosing or not choosing to make now.
It's not in the past.
It is in the past. It already happened.
It's ongoing. You saw it today.
Okay, so that's a new, okay, so you're saying something is continuing to happen.
Right, and it doesn't just happen to me.
Well, what I'm saying is it could be in the past if you choose to not engage anymore, but you choose to keep it going.
Because I choose to keep learning.
But you also choose to actually stimulate the responses that you're getting, and you're going to keep stimulating those.
I don't care if he throws all kinds of crap at me. He's been throwing all kinds of crap at me for ages. What do I care about that? I'm ignoring that.
Okay. So you don't care what is going on inside Colin?
I don't care that he's making me the target.
Do you care that he's distressed? Do you care that he thinks that you're unfriendly? Do you care that he thinks that you're tweaking him?
I don't care what he does.
I didn't ask you that.
I don't care what he thinks. I care what he does.
Okay, you don't care what he thinks.
No.
Okay, that'd be good to know.
What does he do though?
I need to move my chat out of the way.
Because clearly what he thinks affects what he does.
Honestly, I think.
Well, go ahead, Kayla.
Oh, I'm sorry. I really should follow up with Colin because I said this before and he caught it in a recording. And I don't understand Colin. Never will. Yeah. Probably. But it's mom. I don't really understand her. However, when I let go of that understanding, I started to begin to understand, which was awesome. Actually, I'm sorry. I just thought of this. Like my mom was looking at my dog. My dog was like rolling around in the carpet here. And she said, oh, look, he's playing with the light. So there was light that was like shining. And my sister's like, no, he's playing in the carpet. He's rolling in the carpet. She goes, no, look, he's playing in the light. And it just was like this funky light bulb moment where I was like, wow, she really sees things a little differently than I do, or for the rest of the people. And so anyways, we went to the snow a couple of weeks ago and like I started asking her very pointed questions and also dealing with the changes here in the house. I'm her daughter, so like I'm a little mean, but her English isn't very good, and she's talking to these like the plumbers and electricians, and I'm like, oh God, Mom, this is what he said, and she's like, no, just listen to me. This is what I mean. It's kind of cool, able to go, okay, well, once I let go of that idea of understanding her, I actually understood her. So I don't know if I'm there yet with Colin because I've been way too busy. I feel so bad because he asked me, he goes, I saw that recording and I just want I want to ask you about your mom. And I was like, okay, but I'm busy. And I feel so bad because he's been all like, have you given up on me? I'm like, no, I'm just busy. So I think I'll revisit that. But my question to you and to everybody else who is perplexed by Colin, and I could see, is why? Why do you choose to want to understand him?
Because he's not the only person in the world like that. There's a lot of people like that in the world. I mean, did I say it to you, Sam, that there's not, maybe to Doug, there's 9.1% of the population who have the traits of access to cluster B personality disorders. That's a lot of people. Almost 10% of the population is cluster B.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Yesterday, I wanted to ask you guys, like, what do you think your definition of intelligence is? And do you think that this world is full of people that have some mental disorder? And I'm trying not to say that being mean, but I'm sure it's coming out as being bad.
How many pages are there in
Well, it's a fact of
DSM-5?
life.
How many pages are there in DSM-5? Everybody who's alive, you can pick the page of DSM-5 that's the closest match to them. Colin asked me what page I am on. I told him.
But you can have intelligence and you can have, some kind of mental condition, and those are concurrent. There's not a problem understanding that.
You can have.
I actually have a very
intelligence without
simple definition of intelligence. My understanding of intelligence is the ability to solve problems that you encounter in really regular life.
wisdom.
And if
That's
you're able
what-
to, encounter life and deal with what you have, then your intelligence is leading a good life for you. And if you meet with something that you cannot deal with and you can then struggle with it and then overcome it, there you go. That's enough. And I don't think, it's necessary to go beyond that. Now, there are many dimensions of that. I do subscribe to the fact that there is emotional intelligence, which is very different from other kinds of intelligence. And some people have this bookish, academic intelligence, but have very little, emotional intelligence, and vice versa, right? And there's at least, 6 or 7 other dimensions that I've heard talked about, financial intelligence. I'm really poor at financial intelligence, okay? Other people are great at that. And they never got a PhD or a master's degree, possibly even a bachelor's, okay? And I'm really poor at financial intelligence, okay? So there's a number of different ways to model it. There goes that word again. So I don't know if that answers, but to me, it's not a complicated question.
Yeah, I have a very similar answer because I thought about this and wrote about it, must be more than a decade ago. I define intelligence as the ability to think, reason, solve problems, and reduce the entropy of a knowledge base. Think about that, Sam. Reduce the entropy of a knowledge base. That we have these sessions and people talk, lots of words. And what do I write down? 1 or 2 words for every paragraph, or 2. Reducing the entropy of a knowledge base. So I'm taking all this data, all this stuff, chit chat, and reducing it down to the most summary that I can that doesn't lose what's important. Reducing the entropy of a knowledge base. That's information processing. That's how it'll work.
I would use different words to describe that, because I don't think you've actually reduced the entropy. You've added a couple other terms, but the past entropy is still there. The video record, the audio record, the written record is all still there, but you have presented an alternate path to some understanding or interpretation of it.
That Saturday barn raising at the end of October, that if Colin told me correctly, they begged you not to upload the one that's missing, the missing one. That's interesting. That's the one that definitely doesn't exist, either not uploaded at all or not public. It's a Saturday barn raising. And Colin, the very first time that Colin ever approached me, which was October 25th, I didn't know who he was because it said HCK. All it ever said was HCK. And then somebody named Colin Kilburn opens a PM to me. I don't know who Colin Kilburn is. He opens a PM to me on October 25th, which is Sunday. It's a Sunday night. And he is telling me about the 2 sessions that weekend. The Saturday one where Stacy and I can't remember who else he said was involved. And this was when Stacy was in that zany concept of the,
By the way, this is being recorded.
Okay, it doesn't matter. And Colin said that the whole thing was a mess. He called it a mess. And he said that they begged you not to upload it. And then the next day was one with Doug, and he says he didn't record it. He just forgot or whatever. So these 2 either were not recorded or not uploaded or not available to me. Now, what's important is that as he's telling me this that Sunday night, and I'm saying, I wonder if it would have been better if I were there, because he's telling me about this one that he knows I wasn't there, and so he's telling me about it. And I'm wondering, if I had been present, would it have gone any differently? But then in January, he asserts that I was there and I was rude to him. Now I said, I wasn't there. I don't remember any of this. He says, no, you were there.
Okay, so I heard you say 5 or 10 minutes ago, you didn't care what Colin thinks. And yet at this moment, you're actually describing a moment where you're saying Colin's contradicted himself and you're seemingly upset about that.
No, what I have is the evidence to falsify his assertion.
But then what does it matter if you don't care what he thinks? Why does it matter?
It's not a thought, it's a false recollection.
But so what? What does it matter if you don't care what he thinks?
Because he's using it as evidence. He's using a false
For what?
recollection.
I haven't heard him make any claims based on that.
Oh, have you watched the last 10 minutes of that 8-hour session? There it is. Go read it.
No. How many people are going to do that?
Probably nobody. But there,
Kayla, are you going to listen to 8 hours of that?
No, you only have to listen to 10 minutes of the last 8 hours.
I'm just
that's good to
saying,
know.
Gary, you say you don't care what he thinks, and yet you exhibit
care what he
behavior
does.
as though you
I
dare
care
do.
what he does.
But you just talked about what he thinks.
No, what he's recollecting and asserting, which is not a true memory.
But that's what he was thinking.
Well, if you want to say recollection is thinking, I consider thinking as information processing, not just calling up a memory and reciting it. A false memory.
Anyway, I urge you to look more carefully at whether or not you really do care about Colin's thinking, because I think you do.
Well, if his thinking leads to his behavior,
It obviously does.
well,
Just like your thinking leads to your behavior.
well, yeah, because I do a lot of thinking. A lot of my
Well,
writing.
that's an
is
implication that he doesn't. So, that's a little bit borderline right there, Barry.
Well, the question is, that gets back to what do you mean by thinking? Information processing,
Stuff is going on
solving.
up here that creates stuff that goes on out here. Okay,
Right.
that's what I call thinking.
Well, I'll tell you a story.
Wait, Barry. Before you go off on another story, I always make a point, and then you go off telling a different story. Okay,
It's going
because I'm still urging you to consider.
Said.
I'm urging you to consider
Oh, I will.
that you
Don't
care
worry about
more
it.
about what Colin thinks than you are saying you do.
Provided you define thinking as pulling up a false recollection.
Thinking leads to action.
You
Yeah.
gotta go.
Yes, I have to put away I have a ton of stuff. You guys want to see my house?
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a
Yeah,
break.
let's get a tour.
Yeah.
This is the new house.
Yeah. So let me go ahead.
Where's my room?
Yeah. I'll show you the couch. Okay, I'm in the kitchen. Da, da, da. This is like my pride and joy of this pan here.
Wait, are there
That's
6
where I make
burners on that thing?
tacos. Oh, look at that.
Holy smokes.
Damn.
Oh, you have cooking with gas.
This is a super, what does it say here? Super boil.
That's a pretty fancy,
boil.
schmancy range right there.
Kayla likes
And
her
you know I'm
creature
gonna use all
comforts.
this.
She said it.
I do. I like my creature comforts. I'm sorry. If I was, probably in my 20s and I didn't have kids, I'd probably be living in the same place as David Middlemiss. So, or like, yeah. Or touring the world, like, kind of like Graham. So, woo-hoo-hoo. I can't believe this. Have you seen this?
Wow.
I'm sorry.
What's an ice maker?
That's my pride and joy. Yeah. So this is the actual living room.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting because this is concrete. So the floor is concrete. Yeah.
Nice.
And so I have to put that away. Let me see. I don't want to make you guys sick. This is the garage door. And what's really cool is the door has like stuff that you can put, write
a
things
blackboard.
on.
It's a blackboard.
Yeah, right? My parents were like, how did you know that? I'm like, I don't know. I asked questions. This is the front door. Oh, this is my pride and joy. Ooh, let me open this. Ta-da!
Oh, look.
All right.
look.
So, oh, yeah.
Oh, it's fenced for your
Yeah.
puppies too.
Yeah, this is my front
Mhm.
door.
Yep.
It looks much better when it's like coming from the front. Again, pride and joy, decomposed gravel. So sunny California.
What are you gonna put there?
Nothing right now.
Man, you could you
I
got
did
enough
like
room for a vegetable
awesome.
garden if you wanted one.
Well, this is the front yard. The backyard has some cool stuff. I think we're gonna play what is it, cornhole?
Cornhole?
We're gonna have some beers and play cornhole on this.
I don't know that.
Yeah. And then this is like the front of my house where you see this tree here? This is a plumeria tree.
Oh,
This is where
Wow.
like, yeah, I get to string lays and you'll see in the summertime.
that's a very Asian plant.
Really? Because it's
Mhm.
actually from Mexico, but
Hmm.
anyways, it migrated. Here's
Maybe
my
I'm
wolf
wrong.
dog.
What's the species?
He is a Siberian Husky.
Oh,
I call him my wolf dog because look at him.
yeah, he looks a little
You
wolfish.
This is Indy.
Oh,
Yay.
oh, that's
Yeah. So here, living room. Okay. All right.
Oh, there's my couch. Okay.
Oh yes, this is where you'll sleep. Or over here. Actually, this I think I'm gonna put this in the garage. So there you go, Sam. Just kidding.
All
And
right,
then,
I get the whole
yeah.
garage. Okay.
My kids actually made these like painting thingies. So I'm gonna have to hang them up somewhere. Kind of cool,
Good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the backyard. We've got a cherimoya tree, apple tree, peaches, limes, lemons, mandarins, avocados, and then that's the vegetable
Avocado.
garden,
Awesome.
right?
Yep.
So yeah. So this is it. This is where I was sitting earlier.
that's lovely.
I know. That's great. And then I'll show you my kids' room. Although it's a little embarrassing right now because they're I mean, we're still unpacking.
And it
Here's
looks like
my-
your internet is pretty solid throughout this whole
Right?
place. Yeah.
I'm not in the country. This is Maxwell's room. This
Mhm.
is Damien's room. He made it like earthy red. I swear it looks like a jail cell right now. And it's super dark. The painter's like, you know, you're gonna need a lot of light, otherwise it's gonna look like a cave. And I was like, my son would be so happy if he heard you right now. And then this is my room. Sorry. Bathroom. Yeah.
Mhm.
Lovely.
So I still have like a lot of unpacking to do, and I finished my wine. So I'm gonna blast the music and get to it.
Where do the dogs sleep? Do they sleep with you?
Usually, yeah, they sleep on the floor or on the couch.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. So lovely talking to you guys.
That was a
Thanks for
fabulous.
letting me hang on.
Fabulous. Yeah, it's so collegial and congenial to talk to collegial and congenial people.
There's more space
Yeah.
to talk when there's fewer people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This is what I
Mhm.
like.
Listen,
Alrighty.
a pleasure.
Bye, you guys.
Hey, have a good day.
You too.
Talk to you later. Bye, Kayla.
And here we are.
All right, Barry. Sorry if I came across a little bit provocative at
Okay,
all.
yeah, I mean, I get making people think, and you know, I should get as good as I give, right?
Well, I do notice that when I make a point, you make an oblique point or tell us a different story,
I was actually going to reinforce it
but it doesn't come across right away.
because
If
yeah, I
that's
didn't
what
get a
you're
chance-
doing.
I didn't get a chance
Right?
because I said I was
It
going to tell
doesn't.
the story.
It doesn't come across that way.
Um, you don't go to any of Gertrude's sessions, do you?
During the week, it's very hard. And on Fridays are my heaviest meeting days for my day gig. Every meeting stacks up on Fridays. So those are the most difficult for me.
She was teaching us some new techniques, one of which is great for me. This, I don't know if you see me do this.
Yes, I've seen you do that several times.
Yeah, I learned that from Gertrude just a week or two. And what this does, and it works for me, is it elevates my oxytocin, which at the same time pushes down my cortisol. So if I'm getting a little stressed, if I start doing this, I can get an oxytocin rush and that overrides the cortisol.
Mhm.
But she also wanted me to do this one, and you may do this today, or I'm not sure. But she says, put your hands over here, over your sternum, and just turn off your brain, stop processing, and just sort of go into like a trance, like a fugue state, where you're not thinking and you're just letting the world wash over you, but not trying to, keep up with it. And I did that a few times. She actually gave it to me as a homework assignment to say, what did it feel like? And I wrote it up. I don't know if you saw it or not. I wrote it up and I posted it under Doug's announcement of the Friday session. And I said, I felt completely empty. I felt as if process had stopped.
I did read that.
The process of becoming had stopped. It's like a state of acedia is a term, like
Ascetism? ASCETISM?
No, ACEDIA. It's a.
Oh, ACEDIA.
It means spiritual torpor. Spiritual torpor is the best English translation, and it's basically is that all spirit has sort of gone. And I said, I feel, and I said, I know one example where somebody said to me once 35 years ago, I feel empty. And when I was explaining this after I did my homework, the next session, I said, possibly this is putting me in a perfect state of empathy with whoever I'm engaged with. And I go, holy shmoly. If that were true, then the hypothesis, Cullen feels empty inside without a soul. Could that be? He denies it exists. So I have this floating notion that I was able to make myself feel empty by this exercise that Gertrude gave me. I go, does Cullen feel empty? Is there any merit to that? And if there's so, how could I even know? I don't think I could even know. Go ahead. You have your hand up.
So when you say empty, I hear, and that's bad.
Yeah.
See, when I hear empty, I hear, and I am at peace. I don't hear it bad. I hear I am at peace.
Because process of becoming has dialed down to zero. The process of becoming has stopped. The spirit of becoming has vanished. In my interpretation.
Yes. Yes.
For me, what happened, so this is like, sometimes I'm sitting here and nothing happening. There's nothing going on. The world is basically gone to halt. And I'll sit here and I'll just literally fall asleep. Just sitting here, I'll fall asleep. And I do it sometimes more than once a day. And then when maybe there's something, it'll wake me up and I'll go look at the clock and go, God, an hour and a half has gone by. The hell? I don't remember a damn thing. Nothing has changed. An hour and a half went by. I was in a state of torpor, no information, not dreaming, not anything. And I go, 2.5 hours went by and I haven't changed it. I haven't processed any information. I haven't learned anything. It's like I lost 2 hours of my life. Now, that doesn't mean that something, maybe my brain's cleaning up some junk. I don't know. But I had this feeling that process had stopped. The spirit of becoming had taken a lunch break. Process of becoming had ground to a halt. I was in idle state. And I was bored. Because why I fell asleep is I was bored. And so in that sense, I would rather be engaged, notice, engage, mull, exchange, that's basically I went into essentially it's almost like a coma or being anesthesia. You're out to lunch.
So Barry, you don't practice meditation or have never done so?
When I sleep, I'm tired, I sleep. But when I sleep, my deep sleep, my dreamless sleep is absolutely everything shuts down. Now I also have dream sleep, which usually, if I have it, I will wake up at 3:08 a.m., almost to the dot, with an insight.
Right, but I'm not talking about sleep. I'm talking about meditation.
For me, meditation is just taking a nap. That's how I do it. I've always just I'm not like I don't go like Gertrude has this other exercise where you go woo.
Yeah,
is
I don't think that's necessarily part of meditation.
well, that's her version. It didn't work for me. For me, meditation meant that I'm not doing any motor, there's no brain motor function happening. There's no cognitive processing happening. There's no feelings coming in. The feelings, everything dialed down to zero, including feeling. So I felt empty.
Yeah, can I actually give you a rather non-standard notion of meditation?
Sure.
Okay, so in normal living, right, we're dealing with the next meal. I'm dealing with my daughter. You're dealing with the next Zoom session. I'm trying to figure out, whether I need to go get groceries, trying to figure out whether I need to clean up the dog's mess, all these sort of things. There's a lot of things going on. And as you know, everything can be reduced to Fourier transform, cosine, sine waves. And that's really what's going on in every part of our electromagnetic magnetic / spiritual system, if you believe in that, right? So there's always activity going on, right?
Right.
And as it's going on, it has a momentum of its own.
Yeah.
It's not going to dampen to zero unless, you intentionally squash it, or you give it the time to just reach almost 0 degree Kelvin kind of equilibrium, right? Yeah. So to me, that's all meditation is. It's a way to let everything just sort of get back down to zero.
Yeah. So
that in that moment, you're actually poised to receive or do almost anything. You're like a great antenna that's now not got all this noise happening in its circuits. It's like completely receptive.
Yeah.
Okay. You're also like this, machine that is capable of so much, and yet it's fully rested, fully charged, ready to go in any direction as needed. Yeah. As opposed to, I'm going this direction, so I can't really turn and go do that right away because I got to finish doing this, or I got to slow down doing this and then make that adjustment. In your meditative state, you're just ready to go, boom, I'm over there, or boom, I'm over there. It's like, I don't need to stop what I was doing in order to go do what I'm going to do.
Already in a state of nothing happening anyway.
Exactly, right. So that's what I'm saying is it's like almost the absolute readiness for anything. That's how I think of meditation. Now, I'm full of BS because I don't do it as much as I say I do it, okay? But I try and do it as much as I can.
Maybe my brain is rebuilding new molecules of serotonin and all those neuropeptides that have been depleted. Maybe it's just recharging the neuropeptide.
It clearly is. Your muscles are recharging. It's getting rid of lactic acid. Your brain is getting rid of garbage, so it's not nothing that's going on. It's a recharging that's going on.
But nothing cognitive, nothing that I can report.
Nothing conscious.
Nothing that I can report.
Yeah.
Except I can speculate because I know a little biology or whatever. But
right.
I can't say, oh yes.
But your breathing's going, your autonomic system is going, your hands are, clasped, or, senses are still flowing along your neural networks.
But cognitively, I can report nothing happened.
Right. But to me, I don't associate any negativity with that state.
Oh.
See, that's the difference.
Okay, I get that. Because you're right, it is recharging. I mean, when I sleep and I'm in a deep sleep and I wake up and I have no clue, how long I've been sleeping until I look at the clock, I know that I needed to sleep. I know your body needs it. I mean, I when I'm tired, I go to sleep. I think I went to sleep at, 7 o'clock last night? I can't remember. I went to bed pretty early the last couple of nights and got up like 1 o'clock in the morning. I think I did. I think I got up at like 1:30 this morning because I went to sleep at like 7 o'clock at night.
Ich auch.
Say what? What'd you just say?
Me too. I also.
Oh, okay. What language is that in? I didn't miss it.
Deutsch.
Oh, okay.
Although through a probably bad microphone and a bad speaker.
And also, since I have a pretty big vocabulary, it takes me longer to turn phonemes into recognizable words. And that's actually slows down my ability to listen. People talk faster than I can listen. And I think I talk faster than people can listen.
Can I riff on that? Okay. I often cannot perform in company meetings in the American business culture the way the Harvard MBAs and Yale MBAs excel, because they're used to just citing things and reacting fast and letting them, selves, pump up and contribute, right?
Yeah.
But for me, I'd rather mull on something,
Yes.
really let it sink in, look at the second order issues, third order issues, fourth order issues, and then offer something. But by then, people are thinking, oh, he's got nothing to contribute, and they move on.
That's why you'll see me get up before dawn and write a little micro essay when nobody's on. In fact, Glenn and Alex and who else lives in Europe that's on?
A lot of
Tis.
them.
Yeah. So I don't know if I pronounced it. So Tis and Glenn and Alex are up when it's the middle of the night here. So if I get up before dawn, I'm having fabulous conversations with them. And then sometime around 8 a.m. or so, the North Americans start waking up, especially the ones who live in New Brunswick.
Well, the Nova Scotians, yeah.
And then the whole thing, the tenor goes from graduate level seminar down to we're back in kindergarten again.
This is being recorded.
I don't care. He doesn't care what I think. I don't think he cares what I say. Maybe he does. I don't know.
I think, in my opinion, you guys would both get further along if you tried to understand each other's motivations a little bit better.
That's what I've been trying to do, but it's very hard because he doesn't disclose.
Yeah, but you don't actually give him a chance to explain it, because when he says something, you already admit, you're already off onto an orthogonal tangent.
You notice that I hardly speak up in these Zoom sessions.
No, you actually have been more frequently lately.
And on text, it doesn't matter because I can go back and reread it. And on the Zoom sessions, I can go back and watch it, which I need to do because I can't follow people's speech in real time most of the time. And in fact, I usually turn on the closed captions and read the closed captions. If I can't get the closed captions, it's really hard for me to get anything out of the spoken word. And most of this spoken word, when I study it, it didn't answer any questions. I have a question for Colin. I would love to have, if I ask it, I know he won't answer it, but maybe somebody else will. I want to know, does Colin consider his parents to have been a source of reliable information, or does Colin consider his parents to not have been a source of reliable information? I'd really like to know that.
I don't know, but I suspect there's a decent chance he would not answer that question.
There's 100% chance he won't answer it if I ask it. The morning that I wrote up my summary of what I understood a conversational people adapter to be, Stacy says, before you do anything with it, ask Colin if he agrees with it. Colin says, I'll look at it and get back to you. That was 2 weeks ago. He will not, and I don't know why, but I know from the pattern that he will not answer a question directly. He won't answer a yes, no question. He just won't disclose. He won't even say, did I steal, man, correctly, and use his word, did I correctly steal, man, his concept? He won't say.
Yeah, I think so. There's a, I guess in one model of conflict management,
right,
there's 3 levels. And the first level is just, you guys have a disagreement, you figure out what the disagreement is, you resolve the issue, you go on your way, right? Yep. Model, the second level is, this happens frequently. It doesn't just happen once and get resolved. It just happens more frequently. Right. In which case now you're kind of wondering, do you actually understand each other? And did you actually figure out something that can work about it? And do you care to lean into it anymore? So that's level 2, okay? When there's actually a pattern which is beginning to get on people's nerves and you're beginning to suspect the other person doesn't really care. Then the third level is, yeah, you're pretty sure that the other person doesn't care and it's already affecting the relationship. So one or both of you don't really care that the relationship survives and you're willing to let this pattern keep going and it's just going to be a fact of life. Okay. In which case now the relationship is clearly damaged. And then the question is, do you really care enough about each other in that relationship to try and repair it?
You made an
And I'm
assumption.
seeing that right now, the answer on both sides appears to be no.
You made an assumption.
No, I'm
We
asking
did.
a question. I'm asking a question.
What's the question?
The question is, do you want to have a good relationship with Colin?
Starting from having no relationship ever at all.
Starting from today.
It would be qualified. If there was evidence that he's learning at all, but in particular from me, then yes. If there's no evidence that
Okay.
he's learning at all or from me, then no.
Okay. So if he comes back and has a qualified response, are you also willing to consider his qualification?
Give me an example of a qualified response.
Like, yeah, I'll have a, makeup session with Barry so long as he stops attacking me, or whatever he decides to say about that.
Depends on what he decides to say about it.
Okay. He actually said today, you toy with him. That's how he views you. Okay. So he might say something like, and I'm projecting, okay, and it's clearly on the record, but Colin might come back and say something like, yeah, I might repair a relationship with Barry if he stops toying with me. Something like that.
Then you want to know what I would say?
I'm just saying, would you consider that?
Oh yeah,
Or would you dismiss that?
I would parse that. Not only would I parse it, I would look for where else he used that exact same phrase. I think I know where he used that. I'm pretty sure he's used that exact same phrase with respect to Jack. To go back and double
Well, I
check.
brought that up and he said not. No, I think it is, but he says it's not.
I think I have him on tape. I think in the text chat. Remember, he initiated a PM to me. We were not Facebook friends. And I only knew that there was somebody whose initials was HCK. I didn't know there was anybody named Colin Kilburn. And on October 25th, somebody whose name was Colin Kilburn, who I didn't know even existed, opened a PM to me with a GIF of a sliding penguin on the ice turned out to be called Happy Feet, but I didn't know what it was. So here's a stranger who I don't even know that I know, because I only know that there's somebody named HCK, who I don't know who he is either. He comes in and he opens a chat with me. Now we're strangers. We're not Facebook friends. I don't know who he is. He knows who I am because he saw me on Zoom where I had my camera on and he had my name. So this stranger comes in and starts a conversation. And I'm in a relationship with, I don't know who he is. But we have a conversation that goes on for 2 nights. And he, after a while, he starts talking about these 2 Zoom sessions where I wasn't present on October 24th and 25th. Now I know that there are Zoom sessions because I've already been in 2 of them. One in April of 2 years ago, and one like 2 weeks before that Stacy had invited me to. Stacy had invited me to 2 Zoom sessions. I didn't know what they were. When you start a Zoom session, it doesn't say, welcome to, and then there's sort of opening titles and it says, what everything is. The 2 that I came to, just a bunch of people conversation. I never heard of GCC. The initials don't mean anything to me. Just some people having a conversation. Colin insists that I was a member of GCC. Like, what the, when Stacy used those initials, like, what the hell what were all these acronyms? What are these all the initials? Who's MJ? I didn't know any, it was just, random initials that meant nothing and a bunch of people having a conversation, the first 2 times. So he had all this presumption that I was a member and, and that I was present, later he thinks I'm present in this one that he's telling me about where he knows I wasn't present because it's the same night. So I'm just, but I had found out, maybe it was the second night. I think the second night I had figured out, who is this Colin Kilburn guy? So the second night he resumes the conversation and I found out that he had studied electrical engineering. It's about the only thing I could find out about him. I go, oh, that's interesting. I have an undergraduate degree in electrical engineering too. So we have at least one thing in common that I know of. So I start to talk to him a little bit about electrical engineering, mainly because I wanted to use an analogy. And the analogy was going to be something from electrical engineering that I was going to then map into spirituality. was going to use that. I was going to use Maxwell's equations, but I needed to find out whether or not he had been exposed to them, because undergraduate electrical engineering, you may or may not have learned about Maxwell's equations. So I started to ask him, and he wasn't responding. And then later he said, you know, Barry was talking about Maxwell's the stuff in electrical engineering. I could care less. But I was looking for something in common that was realistic. You know, double E, you know, bachelor's. Anyway.
So anyway,
different directions.
I'm trying to go back to the question, which is, he might consider your qualification, you might consider his qualification, but if neither of those are true, then the situation is just going to continue generating entropy.
Yeah, he started telling me about this meeting that went.
Wait, Barry, I understand. Okay,
Yeah.
What I'm trying to figure out is, do you have an interest, and would he have an interest, Colin, if you're listening, okay, in actually trying to repair this, or are you just happy with the way things are because
I'm not happy.
Neither of you is going to disengage.
I'm not happy with
Both of you are going to continue to re-engage. It's all going to be, you know, like little photons shooting off randomly, but it's not actually going to create a fused, you know, new molecule of any kind, because there's not that bonding that's taking place.
No,
For
no
analogy,
bonding.
okay?
There's no bonding.
So all I'm saying is, you guys may be okay with that situation, but then at least be aware that everybody else at GCC will see it and have to then decide whether or not to contend with it.
Well,
Okay.
everybody else is perfectly congenial to come to me and say, Barry, we think you should change tactic or change direction or disconnect. I mean, a lot of people have given me guidance. And in fact, I got a lot of guidance from Gertrude, where Doug is the host. And that's where the word "let it be" came. I summarized what I was getting from them. The message was "let it be." Gertrude said, or Doug said, you know, boil it down to, you know, a title. I said, "Let it be." That was their guidance to me. I recited back, made up the term to recite back what I was getting as their guidance. Let it be.
And
Been thinking about it. What does it mean? Because Paul McCartney
don't overthink it.
wrote a song about it.
Don't overthink it. I know you're going to bring that song. I'm very aware of that song. Don't overthink it. Don't oversing it. Don't over parody it.
Don't worry about it. I can't carry a tune. I don't do karaoke. I can't carry a tune.
Let it be is a very simple concept if you let it be.
Mother Mary comes to me.
It's not Mother Mary, it's, you know, Counselor Gertrude.
Yeah.
Because I do say this to both of you, and I did say this to both of you. Neither of you will let it be.
Well, it's hard for me not to be.
Stop. You don't need to respond to that. It's an observation, Barry. You don't need to respond to that. The observation is you guys are both very similar. You both think you're being maligned. You both engage ad infinitum. You both have voluminous ideas to emit to each other. And you're both pretty sure that the other is also not listening or reading.
Well, I know that he's not listening. That I know.
You don't need to respond. I'm just observing as a third party. Okay.
Oh, you're right.
So given that situation, I'm still struggling to find the motivation inside each of you to keep doing it.
Well, I can tell you the answer to that.
You know what, Barry, you tell me what the definition of insanity is, okay?
Doing the same thing over and over again and getting no results.
And getting the same result, expecting a different result.
But I got different results.
Is it really? Because if you do, then you're making some progress, and then you should probably say, okay, at some point you're done, but it doesn't seem to be.
Well, no, because after I made a unit of progress, a possible unit of progress, then I asked half a dozen people, did you understand the progress I made?
Why do you need their validation?
Because that's what scientists do. They get peer review.
But you've got the data.
Sorry?
You've got the data. right? And for other scientists to really do a proper peer review, it's not going to happen in a 30-second yes or no.
The first thing I want to know is the model, does the model fit what you guys who know him better, does the model I came up with fit the question that Doug was trying to solve? What does these 3 words mean?
Okay, I'll say that for me, that's intractable, because for me to determine that, I'd have to sift through like 8,000, texts in Messenger to say, okay, does that all fit this model? I don't have the time to do that, quite frankly, okay? I can only surmise from being one level more abstract, okay? Not having possession of every detailed message, but just my sense of what's going on there, okay? And in that way, I can then say, is this model accurate? But I won't be like a proper peer review, because I won't be actually digging into the data as deep as it needs to be.
Most of the data was noise. I would say
I won't be able to determine that unless I look at the data, right? I can't determine the signal to noise ratio until I look at the signal and I look at the noise, right?
I can tell you where the signal is.
No, but then I wouldn't be doing proper review if I just took your word for it.
Well, that's true.
Then I wouldn't be a good scientist, okay?
But you can at least say whether the model hangs together consistently internally.
I can say whether I understand the model without regard to whether the facts fit the model.
Yeah,
I
that
can
was
do
the
that.
first. See, the first thing I want to know is, did I write a concise summary of what I got installed up here? Did
But I can't correlate that to what Colin might say.
That's the second
right?
part of the question.
Right.
Does it make sense? Could
But
you
see,
imagine?
clearly, for you to even ask that question reveals, at least to me, that you do care what Colin thinks.
No. I care whether I'm doing.
Barry, listen to yourself.
decent
Listen to
science.
yourself. Listen to yourself. Listen to yourself. Listen to yourself. Because if you want to know what the model says and whether it matches with what Colin believes, you clearly care about what Colin thinks. So I would urge you to not deny that.
I asked if it made sense. It's not quite the same. Does it match? I said, does it make sense?
You wouldn't even write it up unless you cared what he was saying. Barry, why do you want to deny it so much? Why do you want to deny carrying what Colin says so much?
You know why I wrote it up?
You're not answering my question.
Do you know why I wrote it up?
You're evading.
No, I'm not. At what point in time did I write it up? What was I? Who was I respond? Who asked me a question to which I responded with that chunk?
Okay, I don't know, but I believe it was at what, the end of that 8-hour conversation where you're trying to understand the mixer model of conversation adapters.
Let me tell you this. It's in a PM between 2 people, me and you asked me a question. That was my answer. You asked, I can remember if I can remember the exact words, but you wrote like a 5-word inquiry to the effect of what came out of it, or I can't remember the exact words, but like just 3 words. You asked me, sorry, I can't remember the exact words, but that's my answer to your 3-word or 5-word question.
Okay.
Did anything come out of it, to roughly speaking, is what you asked? And I said, this is what I got out of it. I wrote it up for you.
Okay.
That's why I wrote. If you hadn't asked that, I probably wouldn't have written it up, at least not at that point.
Okay. So if it was a response to me and you're waiting for my response, then I'm curious why you went to Alex to see what Alex thought of it.
Well, I didn't, after I wrote it up, I wasn't going to just let you be the only person. I showed it to half a dozen other people.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
Verbatim, I just copy pasted it.
Okay. But I'm still curious, Barry, and I'm going to keep probing at you until you tell me to stop, okay? And that is, I'm still curious why it's so important for you to deny that you care what Colin thinks.
Because I don't think his behavior is a function of thought.
Well, now that most people would not take lightly or kindly.
Yeah, because most people really do think, or at least at some level.
So the implication is Colin doesn't think.
Correct.
Okay. If that's truly what you think about Colin, then there's probably a huge gap to try and bridge if the motivation is even there. Because that's quite a damning thing to say about someone else.
Well, it is. And he's not the first person that I met who exhibits no observable faculty of thought.
Okay, so just for the record, I don't have much trouble parsing what Colin says. I think he says way too much and it confuses people, but in certain key points, I don't have trouble parsing what Colin says.
Oh yeah, no, he can say things which are complete sentences or enough of a sentence that you know what the remark says, but where did he get it from?
Anyway, did you say that particular statement in Friday's session with Gertrude?
No, we didn't. No, we didn't talk about the deal between Colin and me. No, that was not. They don't do that there.
Wait. If not, then what did they mean? Let it go.
Oh, this was just the. Remember, Doug talks about or maybe you talk about the general abstract. The general abstract. I need to go back a week. Joshua suggested that I be in the hot seat, and everybody said, yeah. That was a week ago. So I said, okay, that's fine. So Doug and Gertrude asked, I can't remember exactly. Oh, yeah, I think Doug said, do you have a pattern? Can you identify a pattern in your life? I said, yeah, sure I can. And I gave him the pattern. And the pattern was very simple. And it's a recurring pattern. Because by profession, I solve hard problems. I was hired by Bell Labs to solve problems that nobody had a clue how to solve. There was no algorithm. You had to figure it out. I spent my career solving problems that nobody knew how to solve. And because I had a reputation as a problem solver, sometimes people would come to me and say, Barry, you're pretty good at problem solving. Let me show you a problem that I'm stumped on. Maybe you can help me figure it out. And so I would, say, sure, no guarantee, but, I got time. So I would attend to people who came to me with expressive problem they had no idea how to solve. Once in a while, not often, once in a while, somebody would not come to me and say, Barry, I got this problem I'd like you to help me solve. They would simply dump a problem in my lap. They would enact a problem in front of me without any, explanation. They're just suddenly up pops this person who's a stranger and they're dumping a problem in my lap. And so it's real. For all I know, this is a real issue that I got to deal with. It just happened. Something just fell in my lap. And I got to deal with it because I can't run away. I'm in the real world, right? And so I would think my way through it, and eventually I would act back a solution. Now, at first I would act back a solution that didn't work. And then finally, after a few cycles of this, I go, oh, I get it. Here's a person who has a collection of life problems, as everybody does. Instead of talking about it, they reenact it with me as the other party. And then I have to figure out how to act back a solution, but I have to act back a solution that they can install. If I act back a solution that's too analytical, it ain't gonna work. I've got to act back a solution that they can receive, install, and then instantly that problem vanishes. And then a few days later, a new one comes up. And after I saw a few cycles of this pattern, I go, holy shimoly, now I get it. Now, there aren't a lot of people like that, but over, 40, 50, 60 years, I have enough examples. I go, oh, here we go again.
So can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Is it true that of all the people who came and dumped the problem on your lap, is it true that any of the others you would characterize as, no, they don't think?
Yes. And the first one where I really saw the pattern for real, this person the whole family had genetically inherited dyslexia, which at the time I didn't really know.
Okay, so without the details, Barry, would you truly actually say today that they don't think or that they just think differently?
That the kind of thinking that you would consider critical thinking, they can't do. And they can't do it because they have a defect in a particular lateral nerve on the left side of the brain that blocks the kind of information processing that that part of the brain normally is responsible for.
Okay, so jumping a couple of steps, are you suspecting that that's also true of colon?
Suspect, yes.
Aha.
But now he doesn't, I don't think he has dyslexia. I don't know, because he doesn't write, well, he dictates into his cell phone. So I don't know if he has dyslexia or not. Notice that there's a lot of spelling mistakes, including Steelman. He spells it S-T-E-A-L, which I think is because he's dictating it. But the thing is that I cannot observe him solving a real problem to know whether he has any problem solving skills.
Okay, but if you really truly want to understand him, then starting from a starting position of there's no thinking going on versus there is thinking going on, but I don't understand it, which one is likely to be more conducive to a positive exploration?
I guess it depends on which definition of thinking you go with.
No, Barry, don't overthink it. Don't overthink it, Barry. Don't overthink it, Barry. Don't overthink it, Barry.
Are emotions a
You know the answer, Barry.
No, are emotions a thought or not? Are emotions a thought?
Emotions do affect thought, yes.
They do affect thought. Minsky says they are a form of thought.
Yes.
Minsky says emotions and thought are just two different species or two different varieties. He says emotions is thinking. I say emotions are the time derivative of learning. So he and I have different models of how to characterize emotions, but he says emotions is a form of thinking.
Right. Insofar as it takes place throughout the neurons that are located in this cranium, yeah, there is electromagnetic, activity that you can associate with emotions. Okay, so there's something happening with the brain up here when emotions get triggered.
Did you hear him say, "I'm dumbfounded"? I'm not sure if you were there when he said, "I'm dumbfounded."
No, I don't think so.
Well, I wrote it down because Carl opens his mouth and says, "I'm dumbfounded," and then went on to talk for about 10 minutes.
Wait, are you willing to answer my question? My question was, if you're really interested in modeling that thought, is it more useful to think from a position that there's no thinking going on inside that brain versus there is some thinking going on in the brain, but I don't understand it yet?
I can answer that.
It's a leading question, but you know what the answer is, right, Barry?
Would you like my answer or not? There's no problem solving going on that I can discern, but there is an information processing system engaged.
Okay,
but it's not doing
watch this part of the video again, would you?
I will.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make sure that we don't go over 4 hours.
Yeah, in fact, I probably want to go play ping pong with my daughter soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, there is something going on. It's an automaton that's going on, but it's not what I would call thinking, because it's it's like if you program your jukebox to play random numbers indefinitely, would that executive function be called thinking? Just punch up a random sequence and let it run. Do you call that thinking?
I'm not the one making that claim. You're the one making the claim.
So I'm making the claim. I'm making the claim that he's got a jukebox full of sound bites that he's recorded. He's captured a bunch of sound bites over the years, and he could play them like a jukebox plays numbers. You just punch up a semi-random sequence and you start it, and it just runs until whatever. And so there's nothing.
But Barry, don't you think that's true of everybody though?
It's true about, well, there's a great TED talk that
wait, answer my question.
I am answering your question. 97% of the people run on autopilot and simply run an algorithm that's already stored.
Okay, so in other words, this is not a personal characterization of colon.
No.
This is a characterization of most people, you're saying.
97%, according to this guy who gave the TED talk. That's his number. He says people memorize a bunch of routines and then just run the routines. Like autopilot, he calls it autopilot. And 3% are novel, innovative thinkers. And every time they do some thinking, it's something that's not been seen before. As opposed to just doing the same thing over and over again, mechanically running the same algorithm. Like making the same recipe every day. Every day you make scrambled eggs. You memorize the scrambled egg recipe, you make it every day. It's an autopilot. You're not making anything different. You're not a chef that's inventing new recipes. Just, going through the motions. Just going through the motions. Do the same routine every day. No innovation. You're still thinking.
If we had more
Repertoire,
time,
you're
I'd
thinking.
probably delve more into that because I don't think it's that simple. But
Well, this
we're
is TED Talk.
we're going on, I think, 3 hours and 40 minutes or so, whatever.
Yeah, don't let it go over 4 hours because I want to read the transcript. I don't want to listen to
Anyway.
the audio again.
Yeah, well, I'm actually entertained that this post unblocking session has gone on for so long.
I didn't think it would go on this long. And I didn't even expect that I would have a lovely session with Kayla and then a fabulous session with you because we've never had one-on-ones.
No, you and I had a one-on-one last week. You forget. Ooh, Barry, you forgot all about me, eh?
Which day was it?
When I asked you about systemic thinking.
Oh, that's not on Zoom.
This
That
is
was
Zoom. This is Zoom.
I know, but you didn't ask it on Zoom. You asked it on
No,
Messenger.
we actually got live on here and talked about it. Oh, Barry,
That's right, we did.
gotcha.
That's right, we
Gotcha.
did. Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's right. That's right. Because we
Gotcha.
we didn't want to type it. You're right.
Gotcha. That's why I like having the record, okay? The record doesn't lie,
Yeah,
Okay.
it's fine.
okay? Not unless I'm really clever and really fast with my compute tools.
I often forget where I learned things. So this is why I don't like to have a session where, by the way, this is in confidence, because 3
And
days.
don't say it if it's in confidence because this is being recorded.
I know, but the point is that if people say things, and by the way, this is in confidence, like 3 months later, I won't remember where I learned it. I won't how do I know that? Who did I heard that from? How do I know that? I will forget where I learned something after it's sort of solidified.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to point into as well, because I do notice that before you make a point, you often cite authorities for where this point came from. Whereas I prefer to just make the point and see if the point makes sense, and if necessary, then bring the citations. You and I have a slightly different style there.
Yeah, I do it both ways. It sort of depends on how formal the session is. And sometimes I got to go back and find the source because I can't remember the.
Yeah, but for me, the interjection of the source before the actual point is just clutter in my brain.
Oh.
In other words, I don't really care about the source unless I understand the main point. And then if I'm really curious, then I'll go and figure out the source, or I maybe even ask about the source. But until I know what the point is, why do I care what the source is? Unless you're trying to use the source as authoritative resource or weight for you should believe this, right?
The one that I like to use is the one from Umberto Eco.
I know, I've heard you say that about a half dozen times now.
Yeah, Alex is my favorite quote. And by the way, if you try to find it, it's on the book jacket in Italian, so you can't find it. If you try to search for it, it's not on the internet. It was written on the back of the book jacket of one of the Italian versions of one of his books. So good luck finding it. I went to a hell of a lot of trouble to find it.
You found it and you made it worth your while because I know you used it multiple times.
Oh yeah, I love that quote because it's me.
Yeah.
It's really me.
Okay, my point on that one before we get going on this again, the reason I like that quote is because to me, it brings up the notion again that whether there's knowledge or whether there's skill in presenting that knowledge, those are two separate things. Okay?
Absolutely.
Whether or not there is knowledge, whether or not there's quantum physics, okay, is different than how I would explain it to a 4-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 60-year-old. Very different. Okay, that's the core of this thing I call mentor. mentor. Okay.
Is that a French word?
Okay.
Is that a French word?
No.
Did you make it up?
It's another made-up word that I made up myself. Okay.
Oh,
mentor being guide, but mentor, T-O-U-R, a twist on that. In other words, I guide you through a tour of this knowledge.
You're being.
So anyway, that's why I think the ability to tell stories happens when the actual underlying knowledge is beyond the grasp of someone or beyond the grasp of the teacher to explain it. So if the teacher can't explain it well enough that the person gets it, then the teacher has to, in a sense, tell a story about it,
Right.
to approximate what that underlying truth or knowledge is.
So
Okay.
allegory, a parable, a fable,
Right.
an analogy.
Which
and
is
those
why
are
I say
hard.
I don't decry the Bible as suitable for the time, but for it to be taken as the underlying truth, I think misses the point, because the point is, to me, the Bible was a set of stories to tell people so that they would actually understand something close to the truth, but not actually the truth. Okay. And the reason you know this, I know this, okay, I strongly hold this, is because if you go to and say, what's the source of this story? If you ask why, sooner or later you get a wall.
Yeah.
You don't get the actual knowledge, you get a wall.
The invention of language.
Or
The
authority.
invention of language.
I said so. He said so. The tablet said so. The book says so. Okay? That's the wall. Whereas in true science, in true learning, in true mental curiosity and pursuit of knowledge, there is no wall. That's the main difference for me.
Well, yeah, I'll say I discovered this theory of emotions and learning. Here's the theory of emotions and learning. Where'd it come from? I got it out of thinking about an unsolved problem, and it came to me. And then I showed it to people and say, well, this is a computable model and actually works, at least in normal cases, not in anomalous cases.
Okay, I think we better stop before it gets beyond 4 hours. Okay, Ray?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, all right. Well, look, there's a lot of stuff to follow up on, so hopefully we'll do that
Schedule another
at a
time.
later
We can
opportunity.
we could do a seminar together.
Nobody would buy tickets.
We'll give it away for free.
Yeah, make it up on volume, right? Okay, all right. Talk to you later.
Fabulous.
Bye.